Greetings, everyone. We're actually doing another retrospective for once and forever.
Yeah, it's been a while since we actually did the Well, no, Sonic one was the last one we did, and that was almost a year ago, actually.
No,
Almost.
not a year. It was just like
Was it?
6 months.
Six or 7
Was it
months
six?
ago.
Okay, that's how long it's been. So I don't remember the exact time frame.
Yeah. But no, it's not our Mario one. We're doing Resident Evil.
Resident Evil, yes.
Just so you guys know, we're really not touching the spin-offs because we really haven't played them. We're mostly sticking to the main series games here.
Yeah,
So
some important stuff happens in Umbrella Chronicles that might be brought up, but as for like the gameplay specifics, I've played maybe 2 stages of Umbrella Chronicles. Only 2 stages because I remember 2 stages in why rail shooters suck so hard, or at least why I don't like them. I should say it like that, shouldn't I? More politically correct. Please don't kill me, rail shooter fans.
Yes. So if anyone's like expecting us to talk about like Dead Aim, Survivor, Outbreak File number 1 or 2, or like Gaiden, which is not canon anyway, then no, we're not going to waste our time because they really have nothing to do with anything in the Resident Evil mythos.
Alright, so I guess the place to start off with, like all the other ones, is where did you first learn about Resident Evil?
You guys.
Should I start? Okay, I learned about Resident Evil because I watched my stepfather playing Resident Evil 2 on the PlayStation 1. It's actually how I learned about a lot of the old series, is watching my stepfather play it. I didn't actually get to play it for a little while after that, and I didn't actually beat it until a couple years ago after I'd played Resident Evil 4 for the first time. But Resident Evil 2 did stick with me. So, yeah.
My first ever look at Resident. Are you finished, Lewis? Or
I was just going to go into when I played Resident Evil 4 for the first time, but really it's better left until we start talking about that game in particular.
All right, so Johnny.
Well, my first ever exposure to anything Resident Evil was back in '96. This was. I recall I was in my aunt's house and her husband had a PlayStation, and one of the first games I ever saw was the original Resident Evil with that butt-ugly portrait of Chris holding that gun. I still don't understand that cover to this day.
Yeah, I remember that cover, but I'll get to that when I do my first experiences.
I've never actually seen the original cover. I have the director's cut edition, and it has this picture of a zombie turning its head toward you.
Yeah. Look up the original cover.
It's awful. It's bad box art levels. Bad box art Mega Man levels of awful.
Let me see. Hang on.
Hold on, I'm doing an image search as well.
As am I.
Resident Evil. I guess I should do cover.
Original.
Yeah, original cover.
Oh God, this is terrible.
Yeah, it's
Hold on.
it's bad
What
box.
is Chris's face? My God.
Wait. Load, stupid.
It's bad Mega Man box art levels of awful.
Oh, that
God.
thing. Oh, Jesus Christ.
That's Jesus. Wow. Let me get a
That
closer
is the
look.
first time I've ever seen anything Resident Evil, and of course, I can't stop looking.
Two-Face with a shotgun.
I can't stop looking at the face. I was intrigued by the game just by the face alone, and unfortunately, when I first got the PlayStation, I was more of a Crash Bandicoot Final Fantasy guy, and my only exposure to Resident Evil after that was from gaming magazines. I don't know if you guys remember
Electronic
tips
gaming.
Tips and tricks.
Yeah, I remember that.
Everyone knows
Electronic
EGM.
gaming.
Yeah. That's why I saw Resident Evil 2 for the first time, and then I saw like demos and trailers for that. But I didn't actually play a Resident Evil game until 4.
Huh? So
and then after. Yeah, so I think you're the early learner.
So aside maybe from Lewis, I'm technically the first to play the series, actually.
Huh.
How are you exposed?
Well, I remember seeing, bad Chris Redfield Mega Man box art back in the day. And via magazines like Electronic Game Monthly, I kind of always knew about the series. 2, 3, Code Veronica, and all about that. But I technically didn't play. I played the first time I played the series was a remake on GameCube.
So you started out with like one of the scariest ones.
Yeah. 'Cause I was about 12 at the time. Me and a friend of mine rented it over the weekend because we always kind of knew about it. But hey, now we have a GameCube that has good graphics, and our parents will actually let us rent it. So it's like,
That is
okay,
a
let's
very
Yes.
good starting point. I
Let-
love the remake.
Yeah, we played the. We didn't get very far. We only got about halfway through before, because we weren't very good at the game. Tank
Yeah,
controls.
that I can understand.
So I mean, that was technically my first experience with the game. The first one I really played in depth was 4, but yeah, I'm technically the first of the 4 of us to play Resident Evil.
For me, I've never actually touched a Resident Evil game. But when I was in 7th grade, a friend of mine introduced me to Legendary Frog, who did Resident Evil Code Veronica Flash Edition, which is one of my favorite Flash shorts because it has Alfred Ashford, heir to the Ashford family name.
I think you might actually.
Dude, we missed her. Well, it's not my fault my body's decomposing in areas that I don't want to talk about. Fine, okay, let's just go into the corner and wait till she comes back.
So you have no video game experience whatsoever. You're just more
I've played
exposed
the
to
demo
media.
I've played the demo to Resident Evil Revelations one time. That's all I've ever done with Resident Evil.
And he gets some of the end jokes.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I have nothing to
Well,
say.
well, I kind of have. I was. Well, yeah. It in some truth when I said I learned fully in depth about Resident Evil from your guys' commentary. When I think back to my childhood, I only remember like Resident Evil kind of literally passing over my head. Maybe because my parents were like, "No, she would not like this," because back then, me being so squeamish, it's like Resident Evil, zombies, blood, gore. No, not my forte. But then as the years went by, I have my best friend Kelsey, who is a big zombie lover and likes Resident Evil, got me in, started showing me it, and was actually the one that showed me your commentaries. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. And then the full in-depth game I played was Revelations.
You have, yeah, and you told me you have the misprinted box version of it. Revelations.
Yeah, I as well too. Can
Yeah.
I back you up for a second there, Amanda?
Yeah.
Did you say you got a full understanding from our playthrough?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, you.
What it was like. And same with Johnny's. What? What?
Alright, so I guess start with where it
What?
began in Resident Evil 1, whether it be the original
What
PlayStation.
about Zero?
Resident Evil 1. Well, we'll talk about Zero when we get to Remake because they run on the same engine and have a lot of the same.
I've never actually played the original PlayStation version. My experience with Resident Evil 1 purely resides on the remake for GameCube.
I've played the director's cut, both stories partway through. Haven't actually beaten it, and here's why. I got to the area underneath the waterfall, the fucking cave, and when I encountered a hunter for the first time, it blindsided me when the camera switched and beheaded my character in a single hit, and that was when I said, "Fuck this! I'm going back to the remake."
was the health low enough?
I was playing Jill, which might have had something to do with it. Because Jill, the difference between Jill and Chris, from a gameplay perspective, is Chris has less inventory and more health, and he gets a healing woman. Jill has less health, 2 more inventory spaces, and Barry, who saves her from certain situations if she happens to get caught in them, like the shotgun trap. If you get trapped in the shotgun room, in the shotgun crusher room, Barry will actually save your ass. So that actually lets you get the shotgun a little earlier without having to hunt down the broken shotgun to put on the
pedestal.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
Okay, question. Does when Barry comes in to save you, does he still have a flamethrower, or is that only in remake?
I think. He
The
might have,
flamethrower is when you're encountering Plant 42.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry. Okay.
42, yes. The what happens in the Crusher room is actually the infamous Jill sandwich
Which
line.
line?
Wasn't in the remake, as I recall.
No, they changed it in remake.
Why?
It was so,
Because
it's so
usually
gnarly.
companies like that are good about keeping, like Capcom brought in the
Mark
Welcome to
Dance
Die
crazy.
thing in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, so what?
Mark danced crazy.
I don't get it.
Sorry, it's a Persona joke.
Is that Enrico? Yeah.
That's right.
I'm gonna be honest here because in '96 to like '99, I was pretty much a puss when it came to like horror games because I didn't want to go anywhere near Resident Evil. Because I was quite tender back then.
That was pretty much me.
Like I remember, I went to a friend of mine. I was in middle school or junior high, whatever the hell you guys want to call it. And he was demonstrating Resident Evil 2, And I'm just sitting there. I'm tense, and I was like, I'm not even the one playing it. It's daylight. It's like, why am I shaking? And I was quite intimidated. I didn't want to go anywhere near the series because I hate jump scares really much. Nowadays I find it.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
nowadays I find it cheap as a way to get somebody in order because it's not really a scare. But I was prone to that kind of stuff back then, and I thought Resident Evil was a series that was prone of it, and
Yeah.
it turns out I'm kind of wrong with that in some regards. But yeah, I initially avoided Resident Evil because I was pretty much a chicken shit back then.
All right. On the subject of jump scares, I do want to say something about the old school style games, and that is, jump scares were pretty much the bulk of the horror at the very beginning of the series. Partly because they hadn't quite advanced to the point where they could get the atmosphere down entirely. For example, Resident Evil 1.
Everything is so damn bright.
Everything is so bright.
It has no
Yeah.
atmosphere at all. So yes,
It's kind
it does rely a bit too heavily on jump scares. The Resident Evil 2 was a bit better about that, but to be honest, I think in the transition between 1.5 and 2, it did lose quite a lot of its atmosphere and regressed to the point where jump scares became a bit more of a prevalent thing.
To me, there are two versions of Resident Evil 1. There's the classic Narmy version that we all love to quote so much that has no scare whatsoever.
of.
And then
Look at this.
And then there's remake, which is pretty much the
Is-
reason the thing it should be.
Well, not only
Um,
that, if we're to go further behind that, there are actually two editions of the initial Resident Evil released for the PlayStation. One was the original, and one was the director's cut. The director's cut featured a completely different soundtrack, which I never understood. Which it actually kind of makes this atmosphere worse because have you ever listened to director's cut soundtrack?
The fact that it has music.
Not really. I just sort of tune the music out, to be honest.
Well,
There's
music can make a situation more scary, and like Metroid
can,
Fusion, the music that plays whenever the SAX spots you always still makes me go.
Yeah, but-
freaks me out.
In my defense, okay, I came to Resident Evil Director's Cut after having played the remake for 5, actually, and 2 and 3, as well as 0. So, the music in Director's Cut didn't really it didn't even register in my mind as anything. It was just sort of like the waterfall playing in the background. You just ignore it after 20 seconds.
With the in-game elements, yeah. I'm talking more of cutscenes where someone decided to notch up the synthesizer for some reason. It just makes the in-game dialogue just more narmy.
I never thought to even listen to the music in the cutscenes. I was listening for the meme-worthy quote lines that everyone quotes all over the place.
I think it's most prevalent in the live-action intro.
True.
Which I still love to this day.
Wesker and his super chilled hair.
I love the live-action intro for Resident Evil so goddamn much, and
Yeah, I did too.
I
Chris
wish
is a freaking twig.
I wish every game had one of these.
Yeah.
I want to mention something now that
No, don't go.
Shush. Yes, we know how quote-worthy the lines are. Okay, I want to mention something about the live-action intro. Okay, Director's Cut was supposed to have the uncut version of the live-action intro, but they this is everywhere I look, I hear this. They fucked up and forgot to put it in. so we get the original. Okay, the uncut version. The things that come to mind are the dog attack scene is a bit more graphic. Still, badly edited as fuck. But you see, the hand with the gun in it that someone picks up. You actually see the severed limb attached to it, rather than the camera just cutting out before that part hits the screen.
Yeah.
The dog attack is a bit more graphic, and during the character intro, there's actually a different scene for Chris where he's smoking instead of just crossing his arms all normally, or whatever.
Chris is a twig in the live action one.
Yeah, he is an absolute. Compared to what he is nowadays, he is like, wow, that's Chris.
Steroids.
I still love live action Wesker and his
Wasn't,
super jet there.
Live
Wasn't
action Wesker has huge fucking sunglasses.
Got weird
I
hair.
think he. You know what though?
fits
I
the
love
live
the
action
way.
role so
I
well.
love the way Wesker looks in live action. But to me, the most hilarious it is actually in the very last part of the game when you're in the laboratory and you're going through this slideshow and you get this group shot of all the
Oh,
umbrella
that one.
of all the umbrella scientists, and Wesker
Wesker there
just
with this-
sticks out like a fucking thumb because of his blonde hair, and he's still wearing his
Oh, the
sunglasses.
sunglasses.
You know, those sunglasses don't go with a lab coat at all.
He wears his sunglasses in the lab.
Yeah,
He wears his sunglasses everywhere, dude. I'm
And
not
at
even
night.
sure if he has demon eyes at that point. He just wears his sunglasses for no good reason.
Does he still wear them in both versions, the old one and the new one?
yes.
Oh yes,
Oh my
he's
God.
always wearing his sunglasses. It just looks really stupid in the original because of how well the norminess of the of voice acting contributes, but his live action look is just it's like the guy who's trying too hard to.
He
be
looks like he's
badass
from Miami
over there.
Vice.
Yeah, no, it's Johnny Bravo. It's
Three.
Johnny Bravo. It's all I-
It's Johnny Bravo after a haircut. But
Somebody needs to make a Flash animation with Wesker doing the Johnny Bravo intro.
Darn it.
all right, but just for the sake of an incredibly rocky transition, the remake. My God, what a difference!
Yes.
I completely agree. One thing I want to bring up though, in Japan, it's known as Biohazard.
Sure. Yes.
Yes,
And
Biohazard.
they had to change it over here because Rock Band had Biohazard as its name, like trademarked.
You know
recall.
something? How can you possibly trademark a generic word like biohazard, which military and companies have to actually use for things?
Well, company-wise, I believe, like
I think the way that works like that is you can't use that as the title for something. It's not like every time you type the word biohazard into the computer, you have to pay a 5-cent royalty. It's just like you can't title anything biohazard.
Yeah, well, I guess
am not
can understand
Shazam.
that. The I actually kind of appreciate the title change anyway. I'm just arguing for the sake of it. Resident Evil is a much more appropriate name, at least for the first game, because you are in a mansion and there is an evil that lives there.
there are residents. in
And
evil-
on the other
Resident
hand,
Evil.
when you think about it, the name Biohazard sort of spoils the big twist where the zombie thing is caused by a sickness, a virus. So
Well, it's not like the average Japanese consumer knows what the English word biohazard means.
You
I mean,
would-
if that's just the name for it over there. If you brought it over here,
Well,
then
to be
yeah,
honest,
it would be a
more. To be
spoiler.
honest, it is more popular over here than it is in Japan.
Yeah, well, that might have something to do with the fact that even the Japanese versions of Resident Evil games tend to be voiced entirely in English.
Yep.
Well, because they're all American.
Yeah, but still, when they bring Persona over here, they don't just leave in the Japanese script. They get people to localize it.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying the original Japanese versions of Resident Evil were still voiced in English.
So yeah, that's why I'm wondering why they didn't get a couple of Japanese people to do Japanese lines for the Japanese game.
Partly it has to do with more people in Japan just knowing English than people in America knowing Japanese. But I think they made it English because all of the characters involved were literally speaking English. The first time I remember seeing something canon to Resident Evil actually going out of its way to translate was Degeneration, the first CG movie that has Japanese voice actors and was dubbed over.
Well, that's a
throughout
movie, so
Resident Evil, the old school games in Japan had Japanese subtitles, but all English voice acting.
I think
I'm
that's
not
just one
sure
of
if that's-
those. If you're interested in this sort of game and topic, you're probably more interested in Western culture anyway,
Yeah.
as far as over there goes.
On the subject of the remake, I love that. I love it so much because, now that I think about it, it was the last Resident Evil game they made before they went to 4, and my God, did that horror go out with a bang.
Yeah. If I'm going to play the original at all, it's remake for me. I don't If I want to watch like the Narmy voice acting or the cheesy as hell soundtrack or the intro, I'll most likely look it up on YouTube. But if I actually want to play the game, it's remake.
Yeah. The first thing you'll notice is the
controls are
atmosphere.
better.
You know what? I should talk about Resident Evil Zero's cutscenes at this point because there's a big difference between the two. Resident Evil Zero's cutscenes were a bit cheesier than remakes. I think it had to do with direction. They brought in someone, I forget who it was, for remakes cutscenes that was more had more expertise in doing that sort of thing. And if you play Resident Evil 0 and then immediately transition to remake, you'll notice that the cutscenes are just as a whole much better directed in remake. The one of the differences is that remake goes a lot lighter on CG. I think it's been a while since I played the two.
Everything is generally rendered in remake. They just do a better job of it there.
Yeah.
Mostly because I think it's more claustrophobic in remake, so they have less space to try and render at one point.
I think I kind of phased out there for a second. You're wondering if whether or not the cutscenes are real time, something like that.
No, I mean in Zero they had quite a few CGI cutscenes, like
Like
yeah,
full motion.
but in remake they didn't do much, if any, of that, except when they needed to, and I think that sort of enhanced the effect because the in-game graphics were great for everything. All right, they did everything as well as they could do. And when you transition into a CG cutscene, and it just sort of sticks out.
Yeah,
and that was a problem that the cutscenes in Zero had. It's not that noticeable, but it's sort of jarring.
yeah, that's probably why they decided to ditch most of it for the remake in general.
Yeah. The only thing, literally my only complaint with remake, apart from the usual tank control issue, is the candles. I love the atmosphere in the mansion.
The candles are still
but
really, really pre-rendered.
No, it has nothing to do with what they look like, okay? Why are the candles lit? Who's keeping them lit? Why haven't they melted yet? This place...
Are you serious, man?
Video games.
Are you
All right,
serious?
Video game.
All right, so let me ask you something. If you had to give it a score, would you give it a 9.9 out of 10? To subtract that 0.1 because the candles are lit?
The candles would not affect my score at all. It's just a logic issue. From a game that's trying to take itself seriously and provide a vaguely realistic horror setting, why are there so many lit candles in a mansion that has been let's be smart here. It's been devoid of intelligent life for quite some time. Days at least, which is more than enough time for a candle to burn itself down and out.
The trick candles.
It's just, that the original mansion was bright, but that was because it was lit by lights. By lights. You can understand being left on for several days on end. I love that they made the mansion like a buttload more atmospheric, but the atmosphere doesn't come from a logical source, which sort of kills some of the effect for me.
It's just an acceptable break of reality. That's all.
One-
You just gotta. The mansion's here. It's lit like this. Deal with it.
I'll accept the candles for the sake of having much, much, much better graphics.
Yeah,
I think that if you try to think too much about Resident Evil, you'll just end up hurting yourself.
that's true of the plot, but this is candles, okay?
And if you're thinking too much about the
Oh my
candles, you would
God.
need more free time.
I can't believe we're still on
Or
this
you have
subject
too
of
much
candles.
time.
Can we
I
talk
dozed off,
about?
so-
Can we talk about shit that matters?
Okay,
Back
shit
to the
that
plot.
matters. Bill's white-ass hips in remake.
Shut up. Let's move on to a massive plus, okay? The plot that they took out of the original game and then added back in for the remake.
They fix things.
Well,
Oh.
all right. Before we even get into that, like, what do you guys think of the overall plot in general of the first Resident Evil game? What do you guys think of Chris, Jill, Barry, Enrico, and
Yeah.
When you remove the Narmy dialogue, it's a decent enough plot, but most of the story, interest actually comes from finding out the mystery of the mansion through the files. the cutscenes are nice, but the actual sequence of events isn't that complicated. So you just find yourself more interested in the bits and pieces of information you find along the way.
Yeah, the plot of the zombies in and of itself kind of takes a backseat to everything that's just going on at that moment, which I think works for Resident Evil 1. Where you're basically just playing a bunch of, besides from Wesker, playing a bunch of staff sent into something there's no way they're prepared for.
It's
basically for them all it amounts to, hey, there's zombies, some virus thing broke out. Shit.
And, actually the subject of finding out the mystery of the mansion as you go along is a good segue into what I was trying to talk about a second ago. Because the plot they added back in has to do with the daughter and mother of the man that Umbrella contracted to design the mansion and who then got trapped and eventually died inside the mansion itself. I forget what his name is
George Trevor.
Trevor, that's it. And Lisa Trevor is a monster that they added into the remake. A really freaking annoying monster from a gameplay point of view, by the way, who is kind of like an extra boss toward the end, but is mostly a subplot. And this plot was, I think, wait, did it show up in the Wesker report?
It did.
I know. Put up in some peripheral at some point or other before remake happened. But as I recall, it was part of the story in the original Resident Evil, but they removed it for some reason or another.
It might have been something they decided to add at the last second, though. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. It might have been something they might have to re-add at the last second, though, because you were asking whether or not they're mentioned in the Wesker report. No, she's not. And the Wesker report was released when Code Veronica X came out, which was about 1 or 2 years before Remake came out. Am I correct on that? I don't remember.
Roughly.
Yeah,
Well,
so
it might have been a Japan only thing, but I swear I remember hearing that the George Trevor subplot was expanded on in some peripheral information thing well before the remake was made. So it was there, it just wasn't in the game anymore. And what the Lisa Trevor subplot, I should say, it's not just that they added it back in that I like, it's just that it was executed so well, because apart from the monster itself being quite scary, the actual files attached to it kind of tugged at my heartstrings, because there's a set of files there's this file that you read, which is basically Lisa Trevor's diary as whatever they injected her with drives her steadily insane.
Yeah.
And it just creeped me the fuck out, to be honest.
It pulls you in. I agree. The only thing though that really bugs me, and this is actually a really big thing that
The monster
really
knocks you out and then leaves
it knocks you out and then leaves you alone until you wake up. Like, what happened? I thought you were a ruthless killing machine. Why did you knock me out and then wait until I wake up for you to start chasing me again?
Well, if were to put Chrono in a jail and leave him with all this stuff.
It bugs me. It bugs me so much that it's just that one point of the story where why? It's
like my brain does not compute this. And the only logical explanation I could possibly think up was that she knocked you out and was too stupid to realize you weren't dead yet, and then just left you there because she didn't feel like skinning you alive at that point.
Well,
but then you get up, she realizes you're still alive, and then she goes after you again.
Well, I thought... Sorry.
Basically an animal at that point, so...
Well, what I kind of thought was, like, maybe because of all those faces she can't see...
No, she can see, because she can track your ass down pretty well.
Even if she can't see, she should be able to hear, smell, and touch. So she should be able to find out that you are done.
Well, she's maybe not smart enough to actively check, is all I'm saying. It's kind of like that scene in Star Wars. Only now, I'm not saying it's as well executed by any means, but it's kind of like that scene in Star Wars where the Yeti knocks out Luke, and then he wakes up hanging from the ceiling and just barely gets his ass out of there alive. And that's what I think of when I think of that scene anyway. I think they were going for something similar to that and just didn't pull it off as well.
But still a remake, great game. Great game.
Yeah, if you're going to play the original at all, you go for the remake. If you want to see how it really all began, you want to watch that incredible live action intro. I got a shotgun. I love that. I love it so much. I can't get enough of that intro.
Whiskers,
Yeah.
shiny hair,
Well,
and the
it's
guy who's
definitely
playing him
worth-
who looks like he's about 5 feet tall exactly.
Yeah, it's definitely worth watching the hilarious bits of the original on YouTube at least. But if you're going to play the game, the place you want to go is the remake.
Yes.
Um, all right, and Resident Evil Zero is actually a really good game too. It has the same sort of atmosphere, albeit I don't remember being at any point. I don't remember at any point my attention being drawn to illogical light sources like candles that should have been, burnt
I'm
out.
on a
ages
train,
ago.
motherfucker.
But, apart from
palming.
apart from the slightly poorly directed cutscenes throughout the game, it's actually a really great entry in the series. You said you hadn't played it, Johnny?
I have the game. Like
You have it, but you
yeah,
haven't.
I have it. I haven't touched it.
I never played it.
I'm still like oddly. I'm baffled by its creation because I'm convinced that the game was made because someone thought Rebecca Chambers was seriously underappreciated, and she kind of is because well,
But she has no relevance to the
she
plot.
has no relevance to anything whatsoever. It's like she's the,
I get the feeling they just picked the most recognizable member of Bravo team, and it happened to be Rebecca Chambers. But
I think the
Rebecca's
more they went
role
with her,
in Zero works. It's just that the transition to Resident Evil 1 is really forced at the end.
I just think they
because-
only chose Rebecca because out of the main stars member, she's the only one that really has nothing going on to fuck up the plot with if they put her in the game.
Yes. And, she wanders into the mansion at the end of the game. It's just that when you get to Resident Evil 1 and she's in the mansion, there's no indication that she's done anything but wander into the mansion and lock herself in a room. And logically, she survived the Umbrella training facility and the train before it. Why did she not fight her way out of that fucking mansion like the other characters do?
Well, she could just be tired, or she could have just been psychologically had enough of that shit.
I actually think that was their in-game explanation is that she's at the point of Resident Evil 1, she's going 36 hours without sleep.
I also have a problem with her choice of weapon when she first meets Chris. Okay, she's been fighting zombies for an entire game now. Why the fuck does she think? What the fuck does she think pepper spray is going to do against them?
Maybe she ran out of ammo. I don't know.
Yeah, that's it. She ran out of ammo.
Yeah. The thing about Resident Evil Zero is a plot. It's basically a plot made to explain how the T-virus came into being, and only partly does that because it basically refers back to this other virus that Umbrella discovered somewhere else and used as the base for all their bioweapon bullshit. And essentially, what it winds up happening is creating a supervillain who was basically fucked over by Wesker and Birkin earlier on. They sort of killed him, and he was researching the progenitor virus and leeches at the time, and these infected super leeches sort of latched onto his dying body, and they were so in their weird leechy way attached to him that they became like some sort of copy of James Marcus is his name. They became a copy of James Marcus that occasionally disguises itself as a younger version and calls itself his son. And this leech monster thing, disguising itself as a human, is what instigated the entire mansion spill in the first place, as a revenge scheme against Umbrella.
Aside from that one thing, I think it does a generally good idea explaining what happened in Resident Evil 1.
Well,
From one of the cutscenes I've seen.
Basically, what it does is it takes an accident that was perfectly okay being explained as just a lab accident and turns it into an evil plot by a super monster, which kind of falls into the problem I've had with Resident Evil since Code Veronica made Alexia Ashford so magical, evil, fire magic stuff. It's like I can't even explain it. It's like you're kind of jumping the shark with your villains when you give someone who's infected with a virus magic fire powers. What? The
Oh,
fuck?
so the giant snake is completely acceptable.
giant
The
snake-
zombie sharks are acceptable,
Alright,
but fire powers, oh no.
Let me say this, okay? Giant snakes, giant alligators can be written off as mutations. Okay, magic fire powers, and I don't approve of this in Fallout either. Magic fire powers, not so much. Okay,
I'm actually.
okay,
I'm
well, then
hold
I
on.
will-
I'm gonna actually side with him on this one because I agree. When you yeah,
Giant or
giant-
zombie versions
giant-
of anything.
yeah, giant snakes. Hell, I think Resident Evil 0 had even like mutated gorillas. I believe at some point.
yeah.
You can write those off as failed lab experiments. When you get to mutated snake fire chick that's fire that blood is instantly combustible, we're entering X-Men territory and no longer Resident Evil. And I
Yeah.
feel that I think people might have had the same reaction to when Wesker came back, but we'll save that when we get to Code Veronica.
Yeah, in later games. Well, let me put it this way. In the early Resident Evil games, okay, the Resident Evil series was apart from the narminess in the first game, you could say it was entirely in tune with Western sensibilities in terms of it didn't really exceed what you would expect out of horror monsters. It did go a bit over the top at times, but not in a way that completely completely, broke the barriers of what you'd expect out of the Biohazard concept. But after that point, it started to get a little more anime in how the Biohazard affected things.
Yeah, because I think the only time they really got kind of ridiculous was Code Veronica. I haven't played 3, but I think in 3 they don't really do anything too outlandish in there either.
No, in 3 they have the Nemesis as the big enemy, which is really just the next logical step up from what Umbrella was doing with the Tyrant in the first place. They created, because the entire point of this research is to create biological weapons of war, and the Nemesis is a biological weapon of war. It's a nearly indestructible superhuman monster soldier thing that's capable enough to wield a rocket launcher and act as a really fast bludgeoning tank thing.
Which makes me question why they didn't send it after Leon and Claire first and not Mr. X. Because
Well, Leon and Claire are just running around trying to survive. They're not. Really
I know, but at this
doing
point,
much.
Umbrella knows that they're trying
know-
to. It's not just stars they're trying to neutralize to make sure no info gets out. Well, besides, the obvious fucking apocalypse that's raided the entire city.
At this point, I think I think Mr. X was sent in mainly to retrieve the G virus sample.
Yeah, I think they're a bit more concerned of their data getting out rather than stopping from people going public. Because I think they kind of know, fuck, the whole town's destroyed. We can't really hide that. Let's just make sure no one else gets our stuff.
Leon and Claire, I never really understood why in Operation Raccoon City, Leon and Claire actually specifically caught Umbrella's attention, because
I don't
they're in Raccoon City for like a day. And by the time Umbrella realizes that, these guys are competent, we should get rid of them, they're already out of the city, I don't really understand why those two would catch their eye well enough for them to actively send assassins after.
Aside from
what the Tyrant was there for in the first place.
Yeah, the only thing that Umbrella really cared about in SARS 2 is really concerned is Shelly.
Sherry.
My bad.
Oh, if you're speaking Japanese, it might be Shelly.
I was close enough. But I mean,
it doesn't matter. Well,
as far as Claire and Leon goes, they really don't have much of an interest in those two until, okay, they kind of know what's going on. Maybe we should try and hush them up.
Well, I guess at this point we should just transition to Resident Evil 2 because we haven't begun talking about that game yet.
Yeah.
This was actually the one that I was most exposed to in terms of media. Because I remember the first ever media I ever saw of Resident Evil 2 was the mutated William Birkin, right, but like Phase 2, I think it was, where like the arm is sticking out of his shoulder and he's holding the lead pipe. That's the first thing I ever saw of Resident Evil 2, and I remember reading EGM April Fool's magazine, where you can supposedly unlock Akuma.
Yeah.
from one of the last investments. That's actually one of the first April Fool gags that I ever read, and I thought it was legit because I love Akuma. I was a big Street Fighter nerd at that point, so I was telling my friend, "Well, Akuma,
just
why
on
aren't you doing it?"
just on that topic, the first CGM April Fool's joke I ever fell for was Yoshi as Dragonite in Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow.
I actually saw that. I remember seeing that. It's one of the very few EGM things I still remember. And I may or may not have fallen for it. I don't remember whether I did. Huh.
It's I think it started all those things where you had to beat the game using knife only, no healing items. You have to get an A rank at the end, which I don't even think it's possible to do at this point. Can it?
Yeah,
And then you'll be able to find Peekaboo in the Seafoam Islands.
Yeah, the conditions for those April Fool's jokes were kind of believable. It was all the stuff that came after those that started to really get crazy.
Yeah.
Hold the game upside down with your toaster.
And we've gone completely off topic, haven't we?
Resident
Evil 2. Yes, the game that starts off in post-apocalyptic Raccoon City and then sort of segues into another mansion, which is supposedly a police station, but doesn't really look like one at all.
Yeah, police headquarters in name only. I'm sorry. Not that I've ever been in. I've never actually been in.
Why is there an Apollo statue in my police headquarters?
I've never been in a police precinct, but I doubt any of them look like this.
To keep morale up.
They had, and at the very least, Ryan, put a link to this video in the description.
Play
Play it in the background if you feel like putting effort into it. But Resident Evil 1.5 had a very police station-looking police station. And you know what? Watching all the footage we have of it, which is a good 14 minutes and 20 seconds, I love the look of this police station. It is dark, it is atmospheric, it is a police station, and it is post-apocalyptic as fuck. I think this police station, for the most part, would have fit the game better than what they gave us. And that is literally my only problem with Resident Evil 2, is that, to be fair, they pulled off the mansion look a lot better than the actual mansion at the time. But, it's just sort of a what the fuck kind of setting that they just sort of give you a really bullshit excuse for, but
what is the excuse?
Brian Irons is the excuse.
Brian Irons
is the excuse for everything in this game.
Yeah, pretty much. He's a real art nut, and he apparently had the police precinct designed in such a fashion, and no.
Oh, darn it.
Dash.
Shut up!
He's into human pack.
I'll mute it, sorry.
He's basically the villain from that Heavy Rain expansion pack, only before the Heavy Rain expansion pack.
Yeah. Which is why I chainsawed him in the nuts. See, you gotta do that to keep assholes like this in check. But
as far as gameplay goes, I think it does a better job than...
It's my favorite of the classic series.
Yeah, of what little I've seen of the original Resident Evil 1, I can't really tell because I've never played the PlayStation version.
Well, would you say that Resident Evil 2 is better, let's just say gameplay-wise, than 1 remake? Or
not a remake.
No.
But you see, you gotta consider perspective here. Okay, Resident Evil Remake brought a bunch of new things, and I can't believe we didn't mention the Crimson Heads while we were talking about this. But it also controls like Resident Evil 3, which introduced a quick turn and free movement on stairs, which, while they don't eliminate the problems of tank control, make life a lot easier in quite a few situations.
Yes.
The Resident Evil 2 still controls like 1, but it did enough with the gameplay that it was a significant advancement, like a sequel should be. Like there's the A/B scenario swap, which is which makes for some really great replay value.
There's 4 different storylines in that case, isn't there?
Yes. There's the Claire A, Leon B scenario, which I insist as being canon, and then there is the Leon A, Claire B scenario, and at the end of the day, the catalyst for which one is which way the car crashes at the beginning of the game.
Well, usually different scenarios tend to be little things like that.
Yeah, but that's where he was getting at more with
Yeah,
Tales
it's
of
like
the
a
Pole.
butterfly. It's like a butterfly effect scenario that changes up things so much, and I like that. I love how they executed that. Wow, I'm watching the Resident Evil 1.5 video, and I'm watching a scene where Sherry Birkin, Elza Walker, and the guy who gets killed off at the weapon shop at the beginning of the game are working together for some reason.
I like to bring up Resident Evil actually has a reputation for developing these really massive betas, and the final product
Being
almost
nothing
always
like it.
ends up nothing like it. Like we
Yeah,
have
That
Resident Evil.
to be fair, that's more Capcom's problem of not knowing really what to do with individual projects, so they title it of a different franchise.
Yeah,
Resident
but
Evil
in
4
Resident
did
Evil 2's case, I think they got like 80% of the way through making Resident Evil 2 and then scrapped the build completely. And
That
just
would aggravate
started
me.
over.
Yeah,
That would aggravate me from a developer standpoint.
Yeah, I think the bosses weren't too happy about that, which is why
It,
things
it
feel
seems
so
like one of
Resident
those
Evil
dick
1-ish.
moves that a really influential, designer would make and only be able to get away with because they've done such good work in the past. It's like
Miyamoto.
it's like J.K. Rowling, okay? And when she was first starting with Harry Potter, she had to put up with a whole lot of editor's input in her novels. But then the later books get a lot chunkier and go off on a lot more tangents, and that is the author's influence over the editor coming into being as she becomes more more successful, and therefore can say no to a lot more things.
Yeah.
That actually reminds me a lot, just for a video game example, that reminds me a lot more of what happened with Star Fox Adventures, which was just Rare making a completely different game. Miyamoto says, hey, your main character kind of looks like Fox, and then they had to do the entire thing over to shove Star Fox in there. So it's just like, guys, if you've got the game like 70% done, just finish what you have and then make something else with that other franchise.
With even that,
Seriously.
just have like a head developer recommend it. Like you got, I'll bring up Star Fox Adventures again. Say let's say Rare actually did finish that. I think it was called Dinosaur Planet. Was it?
Yeah, and that actually looked like it'd be a pretty good game.
Let's just say like they finish it, and Miyamoto is like supervising it. He could just have Miyamoto say, "Hey, I recommend you play Dinosaur Planet." Boom. That'd be awesome sales figures right there. But no, they had to shoehorn Star Fox in there for some reason. Because I think they were they were too afraid that it wouldn't sell.
No, though, pretty much, I think from what they said, I know we're completely off topic, but I think Miyamoto just came to visit Rare for no good reason. He said, it kind of looks like Star Fox, and then Rare just felt, because Miyamoto's so, like, the god of video gaming, they felt obligated to make it a Star
Miyamoto
Fox
has
game.
spoken.
They kind of felt obligated. Yeah,
Well, and they also felt that it would sell better that way, because Star Fox 64 was such a massive success at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Resident
back
Evil.
to
Yeah, do you know any particular reason why they scrapped that entire build, Lewis? Or
I'm not sure. I haven't heard the reason. I think this is just my speculation. I think that might have been the point where they decided to go with the A/B scenario swap, because I haven't seen or heard anything that looks like that in the 1.5 build. How that necessarily necessitates changing the entire police station into a goddamn art museum, I'm not entirely sure. But yeah.
it is the game I have the most memories with in terms of the classic style. Because
The thing I remember hearing was that they decided, I'm not sure exactly what this means, which is why I say I don't know why they changed it, but I remember hearing that they decided that the original build was too much like the first game. Except the problem with that logic is
like the first game.
the problem that with that logic is that what they went with in the final build looks too much like the first game in terms of the setting, whereas the setting in their original build looked a lot more unique.
to an extent, yeah, I agree. Not so much the sewer section, but the lab section definitely. And when you start exploring the right half of the police HQ, where it's pretty much all dank apartment complex kind of thing, and yeah, I agree. But I haven't watched any of the 1.5 beta footage, so I'm not exactly sure how to.
Oh, haven't you? I'll have a link to it if you want. Hang on.
Sit right now looking at this right here.
That
Hold
is that is the link.
on. No,
right?
that's
I
that's
just
that's.
typed it. What?
Oh no! I'm clicking on the first link anyway. Okay.
There's
well,
a 2.5.
I'll skim
No.
this while
Yeah,
we're talking.
he's talking about the beta for 4. One of the many betas for 4, from what I hear.
What do you guys think of like Claire Red, like the supposed the not supposed, she is the Claire Redfield.
The random. Well, you see, I think Claire is much more interesting from a character design perspective because Elza Walker looks fairly bland, to be honest. Although-
Elsa would just be some person who wandered in. Claire at
Yeah.
least has some
Claire
purpose for
has
being
some
there because
motivation for entering the city. Yes,
Elsa just has zombies here, time to skedaddle.
it's pretty obvious they're using the same. They used Elza Walker's model as a base for Claire, though, because they basically have the same overall model with different textures. I do like Claire as a character, and I know nothing about Elza Walker's personality, so I can't really compare them.
But then on the other side of the coin, we have the mainstay that everyone knows, Leon.
Oh
Would
yes,
you guys say that Leon's the main character for the series, or would that be still Chris?
It's a tie between Leon and Chris, really.
There's no real main character for the series. It's a whole bunch of intersecting peoples and their stories.
Well,
And
technically, there wasn't a main character to Final Fantasy VI either, but everybody still says it's Terra. So,
If there's any real main character, it's kind of a tie between Leon and Chris. Jill's kind of the
Jill
third
most likely
important.
be. Yeah, I wouldn't say there's so much main character. There's definitely the most popular character. That's definitely Leon.
Is the character that gets the spotlight most often? Yeah.
Yeah.
The character with the coolest haircut is most definitely Leon. So I guess in Japan that makes him the main character. Wow! Watching
I'm only-
Leon get mauled in the shooting range by zombie dogs, and I suddenly think, why was there no shooting range in Resident Evil 2's police station?
Art.
you can alter yourself, Lewis.
We need room for that statue and its gem puzzle. We can't have a shooting range in here. That would make our officers competent.
I recall like the first ever like artwork of Leon I ever saw was like a Resident Evil 2 pre-render, and he's like in this incredibly stiff pose, and I just think, yeah, that guy looks like a total douchebag. And
I do like his story, though, because it oddly works for this type of situation where he's just some kind of guy thrown into the situation because of work.
no, he wasn't thrown in. He drove in there.
Well, you know what I mean. He was expecting something
He was
different.
thrown in. He was thrown in by his own shitty driving skills.
But because he's an officer, he has to try and help where he can. So there's reason enough for him to kind of stick around and try and help whatever's there.
What really bugs me though is that we got into this in the Let's Play. Is that Raccoon City is supposedly being quarantined by the military, and Claire and Leon just waltz right in there, no problem.
Well, no, actually, if I remember correctly, the quarantine wasn't military instigated until very late in the plague. At first, it was just something Brian Irons did for no apparent reason at the time. He didn't want anybody leaving. And I'm not sure if that was him,
I think he
working
just
for
said
Umbrella
no.
or just being psycho at the time.
Yeah, I know
But
he wasn't letting anyone leaving. I don't think he had any policy
it
about
was
people
it
coming
was in the files for Resident Evil 2 that Brian Irons wasn't letting people leave. But by the time you actually get to the police station, whatever he had going had completely fallen apart. And oh look, am I seeing an actual room from the final version in this beta footage? Huh.
I'm sure they didn't scrap everything. You know Capcom. They like to reuse things.
Oh no, it was just something that looked similar. Never mind.
Yeah. But yeah, Resident Evil 2, I only played the GameCube version.
Yeah, it's the only version I own, which is...
Is that a remake as well?
No, it's basically
no,
a port.
it's actually just a really good port to the GameCube. It's essentially the same game on one disc, with crisper graphics. Like, it's PS1 models, but the textures are smoother. It's basically just a difference in rendering technology.
Yes.
It has a higher res, so it's better on
I
HD
think the
screens.
character models have higher res. The backgrounds, though, I think look a little worse on the GameCube version.
They
I think
look a
it's
bit blurry,
it's
but
more a progressive scan.
Yeah, I think
they-
I may have done it.
They look a bit blurry, but that has more to do with the pre-renders are basically image files, and unless they have access to the original 3D models that they used to make those pre-renders, they wouldn't be able to take snapshots again and replace the old pre-renders.
Yeah, but only quick forewarning, Ted. If you ever plan on picking up the ports on the GameCube, they still run for a hefty amount.
Well, now I gotta check Amazon.
Well,
it's surprising how expensive those. I bought them used for like $49.
Yeah, I paid $40 for my copy of Resident Evil 2, and I still see Resident Evil 3 go for like $45 used, and I was like, really? You can get them, like on the PlayStation Network for $10, but the GameCube ports go for quite an amount.
If you really like the series, it's worth the price because they're good, and the graphics upgrade actually does help on newer TVs. But at the same time,
hold on, I'm seeing Resident Evil Remake is $20 used, Zero $10 used, Nemesis $21 used, Resident Evil 4 $9 used. Okay, Resident Evil 2 is $41 used. That's the most expensive one on GameCube.
I think that has.
These don't look that bad. Oh, Resident Evil 4 is $10 for the Wii.
But jump on that, man. That's the best version.
You know what? Yeah, I think I'm not going to be able to play it, but you know what? I think I might add to cart and check that out.
It is the best game, I think.
Part of the rarity. Part of it is rarity. The remakes of 2 and 3 didn't print as much as say 4. 4 is all over the place. You can get 4 anywhere, so
yeah,
of course it's only
you really
10.
can.
I just bought the Wii version of Resident Evil 4 right now.
Okay, good. Good,
literally, I'm not going to be able to play it until I get home for a winter break. But you know what? I have it.
It's a great game, dude.
It's a great game, Ted. You're gonna love it,
dude.
Maybe I won't be so confused by the end.
Dude, when I'm watching a scene at 1.5 at the very end of the video right now, and it's basically what the mansion should have looked like with all the candles burnt out. It's almost pitch black. You're in a narrow hallway with 5 zombies, just all dogpiling you.
Do we have anything else to say about Resident Evil 2?
It's my favorite of the classic series, and
remake for me, but
just because. Well, there's something again I appreciate. I appreciate remake. I love its atmosphere. I love just all the little graphical nuances and updates they did, in keeping faithful to the series before they jumped with 4 in terms of gameplay style changes. But 2 always had the perfect balance of puzzle elements and action. Where
yes.
one I think was a little too puzzle heavy, and I think I made it clear that I'm not so much of a puzzle guy. Probably why I didn't enjoy Catherine so much. But 2 just seemed right to me, and I love, as we're going to see later on in my Let's Play, shameless plug, that I love using Leon with guns. I love the custom. I love the custom Magnum upgrade. I love the custom shotgun upgrade. It's so much fun to blast through Leon's scenario with all the little toys you get to play with.
Yeah. It did. On that note, yes, you said this in your Let's Play, but Resident Evil 2 did start to take the upturn toward action.
Yes.
And I'm not going to say I disapprove of that upturn at that point in the series, because they still did it. They still did it without completely obliterating the other side of things. The one thing I will say about 2 is that I think it handled its despite the ass jerk explanations for certain plot elements. I think it handled its story better.
How did Ada survive?
Oh well, that was another ass jerk thing at the time. That
nanomachines. If you're not sure, if you're never sure, nanomachines.
They threw that in. They literally kept her as a shadowy silhouette when she reappeared at the end to make players think, wait, did Ada survive? How did she survive? Are we going to see her in the 3rd game? It was basically a buy the sequel moment. And surprise, surprise, Resident Evil 3, which was billed at the time as being the last game in the series, had no Ada Wong at all.
Wait, they did not build. This is Capcom. These guys will milk a franchise until it's dead, bring it back to life.
Hold on, Ted. believe it or not,
Actually-
Capcom was actually a very decent company in the mid
There were
90s.
6 Mega Man games by that.
No,
point.
no, 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 no.
Not
This is
counting
the-
spin-offs or
listen,
X games.
listen. Okay,
Time out.
at the time they were going to end the Resident Evil series with 3 to the point where they actually subtitled it "The Last Escape," and Jill actually, dropped that line in her opening monologue, and it basically wrapped up the Raccoon City incident. It had this epilogue that told you where all the other characters went for their endings, and it was supposed to be a solid conclusion, but obviously it wasn't, and they didn't make it one, and they went the series later anyway.
This is when Inafune had a lot more sway with the higher ups.
Yes. I know it's really hard to believe considering
What we
Capcom
did
nowadays, but
Yes.
they were actually a pretty legitimate, decent company back in the mid to late 90s, and then
Well,
they just...
back in the mid
6
to late
fucking
90s.
Mega
see,
Man games.
well,
This isn't Mega
back-
Man.
let's be real. Okay, for one thing, Mega Man was never about story anyway, so there's no artsy reason to end
My-
the series.
And Ted, Mega Man was Capcom's mascot.
Also, I see this as a
What
major
about Captain
contributing
Commando?
factor. I see this as
Shut
a
up.
major contributing factor. DLC didn't exist at the time.
When you put it that way, yeah, you're probably right. They were just waiting for the right technology. You're right. I'm sorry.
So let's just kind of move on to 3. I've never played 3 other than what I
Oh
know
yeah!
of. Yeah, other than Zombie Kool-Aid Man.
I love and hate 3 in so many ways. Okay, for one thing, they tried to add new weapon customization elements that just didn't work, like the ammo types and shit. You start the game off with some sort of gunpowder gimmick thing in your inventory for no good reason, and there's this extra tutorial file on how to use it. I never actually bothered with it. When I did try to fiddle with it, it just seemed needless to me. Like they're trying a little too hard to come up with new stuff at this point. But on the other hand, it controls much better thanks to the auto turn and free movement on stairs. And the atmosphere is much more unique because you spend pretty much the entire time in the in post-apocalyptic city sections, with a pleasant little nostalgic segue into the police station at one point. And there's also you get to see how Chickenheart actually dies, which is a nice nod to that one secret in 2.
Yeah. There was a time period in the mid 2000s where I was a bit of a nut in terms of burning Dreamcast games, because it's really easy to do.
Well, because they use regular CD-ROMs.
They use regular CD-ROMs, and one of the games I immediately burned was 3 on the Dreamcast, and 3 bored me. I'm gonna be completely honest here, because once I jumped from 4 to the classic games, I pretty much played them all in a row. Like I played 1, then I played Remake, and then I played 2, and then I went to 3. And I don't know if it's because at that point I was just a bit fatigued, but
It might be.
3 didn't stand out to me. At 3 I kept questioning, when's this gonna end? It was like,
Yeah, that's another thing that bugs me about 3. Okay, for one thing, it only has one straight scenario. It tries to add replay value with these points where you make moral choices, or just choices, not moral choices, just choices that supposedly affect things. Although, as far as I know, the only real difference is whether or not Barry appears in the ending.
So there's only one set of choices you should ever take, pretty much.
I'm not sure what the best set of choices is, but it's basically like a nemesis corners you. How are you going to escape? Are you going to try to fight? Are you going to try to run? Are you going to jump off this bridge? What? And I just it seemed like another unnecessary thing to me, and not at all a step up from the A/B scenario gimmick in number 2. The fact that we were downgraded from having 2 separate playable characters with their own weapon sets and shit to having one playable character and one other playable character that you play as for 10 minutes while your other playable character is out with the T-virus or something. It just seemed like a step back. But the one defining factor about this game was Nemesis, and that kind of makes the rest of the game a little bland by comparison. It's like Nemesis is a good horror monster, I suppose, except that he gets annoying after a while. Because Nemesis isn't like Ustanok in 6. Some of you may have played 6 and not 3. Okay, Ustanok is obviously a throwback to the Nemesis, to the point where he seems like the lame, retarded cousin of the Nemesis. But
Oh yeah? Question mark.
pretty much. But the thing about the Nemesis was that instead of popping up at just prescripted places like Ustanok does, Nemesis had a way of popping up at random as you explored the place, which basically meant you got your ass right back out of that screen pronto, because he's going to be charging at you the whole time. Or if you're unlucky, maybe firing rockets at you. Nemesis was annoying as hell and so goddamn satisfying to finally finish off at the end. It's like, for all the annoyance you face, when you get to the end and you're pumping those Magnum rounds into him, you feel every bit as satisfied as Joe must be feeling.
Can I just? Is it okay for me to think that the rocket launcher is a bit overkill when it comes to them? He's a bioorganic weapon. Like, why does he need a rocket launcher?
It is slightly overkill, but it makes sense for the concept,
If you have a rocket launcher, you're gonna use that rocket.
But he's a BOW. He's a weapon in himself.
Yeah, but you see,
but a weapon with a weapon is better than just a weapon.
The difference between Nemesis and the Tyrant and the rest of the monsters is that Nemesis and the Tyrant were specifically made to be soldiers. To be like mindless, fully controlled soldiers, which is essentially what Mr. X and Nemesis turned out to be. The only difference between Mr. X and the Nemesis is that the Nemesis was much more advanced, and they decided to give him a weapon. If for what it is, it actually works quite a lot better than Magini on motorcycles, for example.
Zombies? Wait, they literally have zombies on motorcycles.
Resident Evil 5.
Resident Evil 5.
Resident Evil 5, the Magini completely jump the shark with what the Ganados tried and start using guns and motorcycles at you.
Action games on motorcycles.
And it doesn't. It's not complete. It doesn't completely not make sense, because at that point, they're not only are they legitimately being used as BOWs, but they are intelligent enough to pull it off. The problem is, they're the entire enemy force that you fight throughout the game, and they aren't. And by that point, they aren't even slightly horror related. In fact, this is jumping ahead a few games a bit. The only time Resident Evil 5 legitimately scared me was when you find that one Umbrella laboratory toward the end, and you're reading through the files on how the progenitor virus factors into things, and then you wind up facing the lickers. Or rather, the liquor betas, which are much harder to kill than the Resident Evil.
Okay, this is something that never made sense to me. Why is the prototype versions of everything in fiction better than the finished versions? I don't get that.
No. I don't think the liquors betas are actually beta versions. They just have the Greek letter beta attached to their name when you read them in like enemy lists and stuff.
Because it sounds cool.
Because they're not supposed to be exactly the same monster as the original liquors. They're more advanced versions, so they added a Greek letter to the end to differentiate them. It's not the prototype version specifically. It's the version that they're going with now. Like, 8 years later?
There's actually something I always wanted to ask, and this is a complete visual nitpick here. And Resident Evil 3, the opening intro where Nemesis pretty much bombards and pretty much wrecks Brad Vickers shit up by throat fucking him. The frame rate of that cutscene, it screams PlayStation 1. Like it's I think it's below 24 actually in terms of frames per second. But every time I see it referenced in any other future Resident Evil game, especially in Wesker's report, the video footage is running at a smooth 60 frames per second. And I'm wondering what version of the game is that, because
it might just be like the game running on their developer console.
I would assume so, because I played the Dreamcast version and it's still just as choppy. But I never played the GameCube version, and I'm wondering if it's the same or I don't know.
Yeah, it's the version running on their developer console on better hardware and shit. That's the only real answer I can think of anyway. The other the other odd thing about Nemesis is that he seems to be engineered specifically with a built-in tentacle thing that intentionally infects things with the T virus, which is actually a scarier weapon than a rocket launcher when I think about it. Like even if you get out of there, and this is actually part of the story, even if you get out of there, if he gets you with that, you are fucked with a capital F, unless you have a Hispanic stereotype to go off hunting vaccines for you.
I'm sure you can get a T-virus vaccine at your corner thrift store. Why not? It is Raccoon City.
What are you buying? Strange?
Here's the thing. Okay, the G virus vaccine that you need to get for Sherry in Claire's A scenario in 2 made sense because you're actually in William Birkin's underground laboratory when you're looking for it. The T virus vaccine you get in 3 doesn't make quite as much sense. I remember the novel having a good explanation for this, and the game having a slightly knee-jerk one, but You're basically exploring an Umbrella-owned hospital when you find the vaccine. I forget, it's been so long that I forget exactly where and how you find it. But yeah, it's not my favorite part of the game by any means. You take control of Carlos for a short while and basically go on this side quest on this quest to save Jill Valentine because you've discovered your conscience, I guess.
Are the novels worth it? Can I just get that out of the way right now?
The novels for the first 3 games specifically are worth it. The novel for 0 is okay. The novel for Code Veronica is decent, but it fills in the blank of Wesker being there with basically my Gary Stu OC did it. Because the novel series, which stopped after Code Veronica because the video games went off in a completely different and totally incompatible direction. But the novel series, one of the major plot elements is this guy named Trent who managed to bullshit his way onto Umbrella's board of directors and is basically working from the shadows to bring them down. And like at the beginning of almost every game or story, he delivers this very highly cryptic information to whoever is going to be involved in the game. Like he'll give it to Carlos, or he appears to Jill. How he got into the RPG's weapons locker room, I have no idea. The upshot is he just seems like the author's ass-pull explanation for every bit of good fortune that the main characters have, and also the novels basically factor in Umbrella's penchant for puzzle locks into the novelization itself, and surprisingly pulls that off. But one of the things Trent does is he gives the player he gives the main characters hints on how to solve the puzzles before the game actually legitimately starts. So Jill has this sort of riddle in the information she got that explains how to work this one puzzle. Only she has to figure out the riddle as well as the puzzle, so what's the fucking point? But the quality sort of degrades as the novel series goes on, and the 2 original ones aren't worth a damn. That's Underworld and Caliban Cove, by the way. But the novelizations of 1, 2, and 3 are actually really good. 1 and 2 more so than 3.
If give me something to read. So
at least read 1 and 2. The others you could probably get away. You could probably not. You're not missing much if you read them. But 1 and 2, if you don't read them, but 1 and 2 are the best ones. Be warned that 2 does follow the Leon A, Claire B scenario.
No.
Of course, I don't know if the writer. It's been a while since I read it, but I don't know if the writer even cottoned on to the fact that Ada Wong survived. So, in any event. Oh, by the way, Trent is also the explanation for why Ada is there. Just saying.
Well, if we have any
fiction,
pretty much.
Pretty much.
Should we probably move on to Code Veronica then? Because we've been on 3 for a while.
Code Code Veronica is the one I know the least about because it's the only one in the main series that I haven't actually beaten yet.
I just got trapped on this island, which is surrounded by water and infected with zombies.
Yeah.
Seriously, if you guys have not watched Legendary Frog's Code Veronica Flash Edition, go do that. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen, and I haven't even played the damn game.
I'm Alfred Ashford of the Ashford
Family name.
Aside from and shamelessly quoting other more popular YouTube users,
It's not YouTube, it's Newgrounds.
Code Veronica's story is where the Resident Evil series starts to bug me, and I will explain in several very long very long rants about
Lewis is pretty much giving you a forewarning of this the bullshit coming up.
The start of the game is Claire storms Umbrella headquarters single-handedly and initiates a firefight in the search of her brother Chris, except later on in the game she says, "Hey, I should contact Leon. He'll contact my brother." What the fuck? You could get in contact with your brother while you're on this prison island, but you couldn't get in contact with him before you got arrested. What the fuck? Sorry, that just makes no sense to me. Plot hole, plot hole, plot hole. The thing is, this plan doesn't work so well, even though she pulls off some really impressive Matrix shit while she's fighting Umbrella and basically explodes an entire force of their security guards. She very unluckily pulls her gun up empty against the guy that we're going to be saving the life of later, and she gets arrested, brought to a prison island under the ownership of one of the major families in the Umbrella Corporation. And
Could you please hand me those pills? Hey, wait, these are Flintstones vitamins.
Ah, God. All right, the thing about it's not long after she gets arrested, the entire island gets conveniently or inconveniently, depending on how you look at it, gets conveniently infected with the T virus to the point where even the dead body are coming back to life. I did not know the T virus could do that until this game, by the way, but apparently it can.
Okay, I won. I actually left to go take a piss, and I'm back, and he's still talking.
All right. So, apart from the completely bullshit opening, the story progresses fairly well until you meet Steve Burnside, who has the most annoying voice in the series, counting all of the Narmy ones in the first game.
Hey there, baby. Oh, I get it. Don't worry, I'll come back, but I need to make a dramatic entrance.
And I really hate Steve Burnside for one reason and one reason only. I had to give him my submachine guns for the stupid key item. Yeah. Anyway, he dies by the end of the game, so sadists can take some grim satisfaction from that fact. Eventually, you find out that one of the survivors of the island is Alfred Ashford, a man who talks like a girl and occasionally cross-dresses as one. Who's apparently so obsessed with his dead sister that he created an alter ego version of her and occasionally assumes his personality. Something he only discovers himself when you walk in on him when he's like half in his costume or something, and he realizes that he's not fully dressed, even though he's assumed his Alexia Ashford personality. I'm running half off the novelization at this point because I haven't actually gotten this far in the game. Okay, so he goes crazy. At some point, you get on a plane trying to escape, but I think it was Alfred that isn't going to have that, or was it Alexia? I forget. You basically get
You're already confusing me, man.
Basically, that's the story, man. Okay. Back to Antarctica, at which point the plot remembers that Leon called Chris at some point and gave him the coordinates for the Rockport Island. So you start playing as Chris for the rest of the game. You run into Wesker. If you're playing the Dreamcast version, you're not going to see much of him because the game just sort of forgets about him at some point. And then you go to Antarctica, where you discover that the T. Veronica virus has been, incubating in Alexia Ashford's real form for like years and years. And when she wakes up, she discovers that she has gained the power to turn into a magical fire god and wreck shit up. And I'm not sure if this happens in the Dreamcast version, but Albert Wesker fights her and gets his ass kicked.
I think that was Code Veronica X, the re-release.
Yes. Yeah. Well, Albert Wesker is tries and very badly fails to. Actually, I think it was in the original version because it's in the novel.
It wasn't even a negotiation. It just says, "Give it to me." No, okay.
Well, he at least tried to negotiate in the novel, which makes his novel incarnation slightly smarter.
I'm basing it entirely off the game, and that wasn't a negotiation.
well, Alexia Ashford basically sends him running with his tail between his legs, and the rest of the game is basically she's your hideously relentless boss that you're going to have to blow up by the end of the game. You make your traditional self-destruct timer escape, this time on a fighter jet, I believe. And if you're playing the PS2 re-release, you see Wesker again, who has a very dramatic, very dramatical cutscene encounter with Chris Redfield, and then you escape. The end.
So, all right, because I know the Wesker report add-on only came with Code Veronica X, but since I have very, very little experience with Code Veronica in its entirety, I just know that it kicks my ass left and right.
Yes.
Because it is definitely the hardest of the.
Okay, it has key item puzzles like the other old school Resident Evils, but one of the first ones involves a goddamn metal detector, and I hate that metal detector.
I hate that
so much.
I do too. I really do too.
Basically, you have to get this eagle emblem that's made of metal from the one side of the metal detector to the other. How do you do so? By finding this other key item that's a block of some special metal detector, anti-metal detector alloy, and you put it in a you put both items in a duplication machine and make a new undetectable metal emblem, and then you have to carry that through the metal detector. But here's the thing, okay? You have to put all your metal objects in a security box every time you pass through, including the ammunition you picked up on the other side.
It's really annoying, and it happened so early in the game, and it kind of turned me off, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, that sort of item puzzle mojo belongs more toward the middle of the game than the beginning, really. I do like that they give you a relatively badass weapon early on, except that as far as I know, there's no way to reload it. So you have to be careful with it. It's a pair of submachine guns. And you might think, what is the point of two weapons in tank control shooter game? Well, the point is that you auto-aim with them, and with a dual-wielding weapon, you can auto-aim in two directions, which is actually pretty helpful.
Completely agree. Though, all right. In terms of the story itself, Wesker comes back.
Wesker comes back. Yes.
Wesker, he's back. Apparently he injected himself with the an experimental. Was it the T virus or was it an experimental virus?
I forget what he said, but they hadn't really ironed out his reason for having superpowers at that point. Resident Evil 5 explains it really. It explains it completely, not necessarily in a good way, but it at least explains it. The Code Veronica is basically he appears and it's dramatical, but it doesn't really affect the gameplay at all. It's more like, oh wait, we have an overarching plot. We should probably get on that somehow. Let's bring that back. And he's there. He's a bad guy working in the background. So now you have someone other than Umbrella Corporation to work on, which is good because in the next game they just sort of ditched Umbrella completely.
This is a very interesting plot element, so we're going to ignore it for the next game.
In Resident Evil 4, that was pretty much the only really connecting thing, is that Ada Wong was in Europe, and apparently she was working with Wesker. And it's very peripheral. You only ever hear about it in one line of dialogue from Leon, but there it is.
Is Ada Wong supposed to be a good guy or a bad guy?
She's
well, first off, I'm sure she's a girl.
All right, Ada Wong's motivation.
You know what I mean.
as of Resident Evil 6, Ada Wong's motivation is a mystery. In Resident Evil 6, there is a fake Ada Wong, spoiler alert, who is running around causing all sorts of chaos, and pretty much half the cast thinks Ada Wong is working with Neo Umbrella, and that is pretty much the backbone of Ada Wong's plot. So yeah, I don't. The answer is we don't know, but she's not the antagonist of Resident Evil 6, so that's what counts.
Yeah.
Oh, chaotic neutral. I see.
Pretty much.
At this point, we don't even know. We don't even know who she's really working for, because when you in the PS2 version of Resident Evil 4, there's a short mode where you play as Ada, and she basically at the end of 4, you think she's going to take the sample of the Las Plagas back to Wesker, but she basically chooses that moment to
Oh, God.
abandon him. She's like, nope, and she takes the sample back to whoever it is she's working for.
I just remembered that I have separate ways footage in my hard drive. I gotta get to editing that up.
Dude, really need to commentate on that. Otherwise, we won't have the full Resident Evil 4 package.
Yeah. So I guess that's it for Code Veronica, unless you guys have more to say on it.
Because the thing is, though, is, like, me and Lewis don't have much experience with it. I'm assuming you don't have any with it either?
No, I have none.
As a whole, okay, from what I've experienced of Code Veronica, is that the story gives me a headache. It's one of the few places in the series where I legitimately say, I just stop thinking about it at some point, and you'll be much happier with the game. And it's probably Code Veronica where people started to think that Resident Evil's overarching plot was getting too convoluted. The game itself, a little too challenging to be an entry point. Quite a lot too challenging to be an entry point, though, is quite solid as long as you don't mind it being one of the harder games in the genre.
Yeah. I completely agree.
Mm-hmm. I don't think 3D environments work as well as pre-renders, although I've said that already, and I kind of miss being able to walk up and down stairs freely rather than pushing a button and then auto-walking the entire thing.
Castlevania.
All right, so I guess we should move on to Resident Evil 3.5.
Oh,
Can't we just go to 4?
Yeah. No, we have to talk about this because it's actually a pretty substantial data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
None of you have ever played it.
Yes, I have.
I
remember beating Mundus. That's another.
I never really got into the Silent Hill series.
Okay,
So.
Yeah, it's pretty much if Resident Evil played like Silent Hill.
Yeah, that's the 3.5 build we have footage for, but I want to go off on a slight tangent here. Okay, Resident Evil 4 saw so many starts and stops during its development that, we don't even know half of them.
Yeah, more so than any other Resident Evil at this point.
Is that at some point there was a bug in whatever build they were working with all the time that lets you juggle zombies with your guns. And, what is the name? Hideki Kamiya? Whatever. The developer who became famous for Devil May Cry thought it was really cool and decided to base a game off of it. And that's why we have Devil May Cry 1. A very Resident Evil-like game in a lot of ways, you might notice even without knowing the history behind it. Like the shambling puppets that totally aren't zombies.
Does it control with tank controls?
The puzzle-filled castle that totally isn't a mansion, etc.
But Resident Evil 3.
And controls, and that's actually something I would have liked to see in the actual old school series. Is it controls freely despite having fixed camera angles.
But Resident Evil 3.5, I remember being shown early 2002, I believe it was.
I didn't discover it until like 2 years after I played 4. Because
I remember keeping an eye on it when they were first showing it, and it looked really atmospheric and looked really cool to play. Because everything was either very dark and very shadowy, and it was hard to tell what was going on. And
yeah,
it looked like a aside from the supernaturalist elements to it, which didn't really get much of an explanation, it felt like a proper follow-up to Resident Evil. It
basically had an atmosphere like the college campus at the beginning of Leon's story in 6. Except in that, he has a flashlight strapped to his face instead of in his hand, and you're fighting actual zombies.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, actually, you know what? That is actually one of the first things that popped in my head when I first. Because again, you said Ryan, you said you saw it in 2002, was it?
Roughly.
Because at that point, as I mentioned earlier, I wasn't a big Resident Evil guy until I played 4 for the first time. So, and when I first discovered YouTube in 2005, and around about a year later after that, I ran into the 3.5 footage, and the first thing I thought of was Luigi's Mansion, and because it's pretty much almost exactly like that, only with a much darker atmosphere. But
Somewhat,
I
yes.
always
Now
thought
that I think about it.
it intrigued me, but I
Oh,
can
you know
completely
what? Now that I
understand.
think about it, I'm watching the footage now, and it's in a mansion setting like a remake, and it's really dark, really atmospheric. And you know what? Because of the flashlight, they don't need to light illogical candles everywhere. All the candles are no, the candles are there. They have candles,
Just
but the
drop it,
candles
man.
they have candles, but the candles aren't lit at all. There's a fireplace that's still burning.
The
But I'll let
candles.
that slide.
Oh, you're not dead.
What is with this ghost with a hook, though? That is creepy as hell, but really out of place. And there's this room with armor in it, and Leon is exploring like a Resident Evil game. It's actually pretty cool. It's like something I'd expect out of the Spencer estate. But at some point, and I think this something that actually makes some more sense. You know, I think at some point that one of these armors is going to try and attack him, except it's the what the fuck? The taxidermist deer head on the wall just came to life, fell to the ground, and died.
Well, that kind of happens when it comes to life.
And you know, I think that was it was the trigger for one of Leon's hallucinations. That was one of the things that was going on in this game. He was infected with something, and he was having a lot of weird hallucination type things. And when he hallucinated in this room, suddenly all of the armors are in combat stances, and some of them will try to sort of swing their axe at him and then fall apart. Something that did actually happen in the final version of 4, although in that case they were all filled with parasite things. And I'm not sure what triggers this, but occasionally Leon's hallucinations in this build, everything goes like darkish gray, and the entire place gets
It's suddenly you're watching it. I kind of think like you're watching it from like a camera.
Yeah, it's like the shading over the entire game changes, and then suddenly the game is supernatural.
Something.
Yeah.
Your
It
description
still
kind
looks
of
good.
reminds me of what's that? Eternal Darkness.
Something like that. Yeah.
Sanity's Requiem, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that. Whatever. That. It reminds me of that. The way you're talking about it.
It still looked interesting, and I want to play it still.
Looked interesting, but at the same time, even though the story was more relevant to Resident Evil 4, I can't help but think it's another idea that should have just gone into another franchise. In fact, I kind of wish they had done something with this build like they did with Devil May Cry. It would have been interesting to see where they went with it. But
Oh well.
Resident Evil 3.5 died, and we haven't seen hide nor hair of it since the 6 minutes and 59 seconds of footage. Resident Evil 4 itself did so many things right and yet so many things wrong.
Gameplay, it's fantastic. Story-wise,
Gameplay. At this point, we can end it here and say watch our commentary of it. But
Yes,
it's just for
it's
my
the best
God.
game of the series.
I jumped in. My parents took me and my brother Mark to the mall in 2005, and I picked up Samurai Legend Musashi, which was an incredible disappointment, by the way.
Oh.
And my brother Mark. My brother Mark picked up Resident Evil 4 because he was curious enough for it, and he played it. He was getting scared out of his mind for a few things here and there, but he said he was enjoying it from a gameplay perspective. So after he cleared it, I decided to play it, and the rest is history. Because
What
I've
a
had
good game.
a hell of a fun time. This is one of my favorite games of all time, bar none.
Dude.
I love Resident Evil 4 so much.
The spirit inside a painting just came to life and attacked Leon. What
Yeah, it's
the
the Hookman.
fuck?
Dun, 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 dun,
Duh,
dun.
duh. Wait, that is a Luigi's Mansion boss.
Yeah.
Fuck.
The Resident Evil 4. Okay, it's as a standalone. game, as a complete standalone package, it is amazing. All right. It is a bit awkward by today's standards on account of not being able to move and shoot, because even though you're in a much better position for it in terms of camera, you're still tank controlled. It's just that because the camera's behind the back, it's not as disorienting. So it feels more free, even though it's not.
And I think the way the game's structured, you really don't need to worry about the tank controls in themselves, because I never really had an issue with the control in general.
It didn't really give me any trouble. It was annoying not to be able to move and aim at the same time, but
the game never throws enough at you to where that's quite an issue.
Yeah, the balance is right. The things it does wrong are more as part of the series than as a game itself. It does, except for the first third of the game, which has enough atmosphere and horror to it to qualify as survival horror, and one or two scattered moments during the other parts of the game. It's not really much of a horror game at all.
Napoleon Gundam fight.
It's not horror. It's not scary whatsoever. It really isn't. But
well, I did like the village section from that.
The village section in the beginning is actually quite tense.
Yes. And when you get to the castle, though, the castle is just sort of, it's too gimmicky to be horror, okay? It goes beyond the Spencer estate and just becomes a fucking playhouse. It's a maniacal playhouse, but more in a cheesy B-action way than a B-horror way, you know?
Is it bad that the first thing that pops into my head is giant Napoleon? Whenever I think of the castle.
That is the most memorable part. But there's also the place where you're jumping around on these spinning platforms inside a fucking lava level, and it's like, why did we just walk into a Mario stage? And it's fun from a gameplay point of view. The castle is actually one of the best parts of the game. It's just that from a horror perspective, it's like, where did my genre go? And then you get, and of course, the final part of the game is a cross between a laboratory and a war zone. And while it does introduce the regenerators, which are actually some of the creepiest enemies in the game, the overall area itself is kind of it's just sort of it's the closest thing to Resident Evil 5 that Resident Evil 4 ever does. You know what I'm saying? It starts to feel more like a generic shooter when you get to that area, especially when the big guy comes out with his chain gun.
Oh, JJ.
Yes. And then it throws in too many obviously gamey elements to really take seriously, like the merchant and his shooting minigame.
What are you buying, stranger?
Well, I never really had a problem with that, considering it was completely
like I say, from a gameplay perspective, it's good. It just feels like it shouldn't be there in wherever Leon is. It's like if I were living this from Leon's point of view, I'd look at the merchant and I'd be like, what the fuck?
Why is this here? And have you seen the candles lately? God, what is the deal with those candles?
Oh, for fuck's sake. You know what? I never had that thought once in Resident Evil 4.
But you had it in Remake.
No, but he's actually complimenting 4. That's a plus.
I'm still
my
flabbergasted by that.
biggest problem by far with 4 is the story, and it's not entirely from a Resident Evil point of view. All right, you're basically a cheesy action hero who spouts a lot of banter lines. Who's a super skilled secret agent. You go to Europe to save the princess. I mean, president's daughter. Sorry,
president's daughter has been kidnapped by terrorists. Are you a bad enough dude to rescue the president's daughter?
Pretty much, and you basically fight cheesy action villains the entire way through on your way there. And the one time any of those bosses becomes a legitimate horror boss is actually the second least likely one. Chief Mendez becoming like something that you might expect to see out of the G-Virus, and that was actually a pretty tense boss fight because you were in a burning house the entire time fighting this fucking scary ass mutant thingamafucker.
Spanish Centipede.
Yes, pretty much. It was the most Resident Evil of the game's bosses.
But I love my giant eyeball fuck me lights.
Get a load of this.
But the villain was cheesy as hell. The plot was basic as it gets when you think about it, and then the game basically plays up this tension where you and Ashley are both infected with parasite eggs, and then it's like they wrote themselves into a corner, didn't know how to legitimately solve the problem, and just decided to throw radiation treatment in a random room.
Random radiation treatment in a laboratory that the boss, for some reason, has not destroyed yet.
Resident Evil 8, Leon's going to be suffering from tumors, trust me.
It makes sense. It makes sense that they would have a cure in the lab. It doesn't make sense that Leon would just stumble across it, see it, and use it.
And know how to use it.
Yeah.
In Resident Evil 2, okay, the character was legitimately looking for a cure at the time, had to work to find it, put it together, and then get it to who needed it. In Resident Evil 3, it was a bit more contrived, but they were legitimately looking for a cure. They had to spend time going after it, finding out where to get it, getting it back to the person. In Resident Evil 4, they just sort of walk into it. And it's there, and they're like, "Woot!"
And I just remembered, though, it's not even Leon that operates it; it's Ashley that operates the machine.
Yeah, because technically,
they say, "I hope to God she knows how to use this."
Yeah, I hope she took
And Leon gets up. Don't worry, Ashley. This won't hurt a bit.
like a bitch, actually, but Anyway, so yeah, and then there's Krauser, the most random ass character ever in the series.
Wait, is this Spanish Napoleon?
No,
No,
Krauser is the Legends of the Hidden Temple guy.
Krauser is the knife fight dude, who's some old soldier companion of Leon, except you've never seen him before, because the series completely skipped over that chapter of Leon's life until the Dark Side Chronicles.
You want to know who he is? You want to know who he reminded me of? Bennett from Commando. he actually looks like he walked right out of the Commando set and walked right into Resident Evil and befriended Leon in between 2 and 4, because it's immediately who I thought of, like the guy who used to be partners with the one guy and then went off to do his own evil thing. It's Bennett. It's like from Commando.
Resident Evil 4, okay. Well, let me put it this way. Okay, Krauser looks like one of those characters that they added into Resident Evil 4 to make you think, I wonder what this guy's story is. I should play the old games to find out. Only unlike with Ada Wong, who does that exact same thing, playing the old games gives you nothing on this guy because he never showed up until this very moment. And we're supposed to care that he has a history with Leon? You obviously didn't think we cared enough about that history to show it in a game. And they added him into the Dark Side Chronicles, and I think I remember hearing some good things about him in that game at the least, but not enough to make me want to play it.
I don't think it justifies what he was in 4 anyway.
It doesn't, because at the time 4 came out, he just sort of popped out of the ground. Much like everything else in the game except Ada Wong.
What about that guy with the chainsaw and the bag on his head?
Okay,
the guy not Leatherface.
Dr. Salvin.
Head. Okay, the chainsaw maniac is
Not Leatherface.
It's one of the scariest things in the game, but not for a Resident Evil type reason. It's just because, okay, he is stereotypical serial killer horror figure. He's running at you, your guns aren't stopping him, and he is one-hit kill.
Yeah, that's the only reason why he's scary, because he's a one-shot.
That's just the reason I remember that guy is because in an issue of Nintendo Power, I remember in like a joke question and answer, somebody asked what's under that guy's mask, and so Nintendo Power put a picture of it, and then it's just a picture of a smiling Toad head from Mario Party. That's why I remember him.
The chainsaw guy reappeared in both 5 and 6. In 5, they made him too goddamn hard. He's practically a boss, and you're constantly running around the battlefield trying to stay the fuck away, not to mention keep your partner from getting one hit killed. And And it's just it bypasses scary and just becomes a royal pain in the ass. Fortunately, you don't have to put up with him that often. In Resident Evil 6, they totally jumped the shark with the chainsaw guy by turning him into one of the most fucked up mutants imaginable, complete with a mutant chainsaw. It was one of the only points in the game where I looked straight at the enemy, paused the game, put the controller down, and then just walked away for 10 straight minutes because I couldn't process what I was seeing.
As far as Resident Evil 4 goes, I think it's my favorite game in the series. As someone who doesn't particularly care about the plot all that much.
Overall, Resident Evil 4 is the most solid game in the series as a standalone package. It also has, hands down, the best inventory system in the series, and that is not just because the inventory sucks in all the others.
It makes fucking sense.
I completely agree, and it pains me to say that too, because you would think with sequels they would somehow find a way to enhance what was already given to them, but this is the only game that has this inventory system like this, and
it worked.
It's so good.
It is a great inventory system, and it's sad to see it go, but they couldn't possibly translate it in 5 and 6 because multiplayer is all the rage, and they just had to jump on that bandwagon.
Are we pretty much done with 4? Because I've got nothing to say about 4 as a game.
Let's just use this as a segment.
Well, then I'm gonna just get a problem. Well, first off, I think that too many games are forcing co-op down our throats, and I blame New Super Mario Brothers for that. But I don't think that a horror series should be co-op, because if you think about it, having a buddy next to you makes it a lot harder to be scared because you're more likely to start riffing on the game when someone's there.
Okay, let me put it this way, okay? Resident Evil 0, while not being multiplayer at all, had an excellent foundation for co-op, because half the time the characters were separated, yet trying to help each other out, and yet both stuck in completely separate claustrophobic situations trying to survive against really scary shit. All right, I'm not saying it wasn't awkward, because it was kind of awkward at the time because you were constantly switching back and forth trying to solve puzzles and shit, but that is the kind of co-op that Resident Evil should have, and it's kind of where Resident Evil 6 went with it, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Okay, in Resident Evil 5, okay, the problem was that in every conceivable way, the co-op totally undermined all of the single-player experience. Because you had an AI partner who still operated with all the same limitations as a co-op partner. They were dumb as a rock. They used up all your healing items. They used up all your ammunition. Basically, they used up anything you gave them.
Don't give Shiva any healing items, or just give her the submachine guns.
No. You're doing it wrong. If you're gonna give Shiva anything, it's a sniper rifle, because you actually really go with that.
Co-op. You know what? That's one of the things. It's also true of Mass Effect. Sniper rifles are like better used by AI partners than by actual people, because they don't take as long to line up a shot. And then after all of that, Sheva goes and gets herself stuck on a door while running from the chainsaw maniac and gets her ass killed. You wonder why people hate her. So
I thought it was because of the incredibly racist alternate costume.
Well, no, but I'm sure someone.
Oh wait, that's why we hate Capcom. Oh, okay.
Well, you see, the thing about it is, everyone hates playing Resident Evil 5 in single player, specifically because Sheva is such a dumbass. The Resident Evil 6 is completely playable as a single-player experience because they turned the AI partner into Tails. You can completely ignore them. Completely. Except in those one or two situations where your objective is to protect them.
Yes.
The thing is, it's just, if you can work co-op into a game well without undermining single player, I'm all for it. But the moment your multiplayer starts to fuck up my single player fun, I cry foul. especially when the series has been for 5 straight games plus a prequel. All right, a dedicated single-player experience.
I agree completely.
The main fan base is not only a horror fan base, but a single-player fan base. Resident Evil 5 shits on both.
Well, they kind of threw out the horror with zombies on motorcycles.
I think they threw out more of the horror setting with its daylight premise because everything.
Yeah, there's
No,
that.
I don't think that daylight can
daylight-
necessarily makes it less scary.
Okay.
I think, like,
While we're on the subject of daylight, they had an interesting idea that they just never implemented in the final release. Okay, heat-induced hallucinations. That was
Fatigue.
going to
Yeah.
be. That
Yeah,
was going
I
to
read
be,
the because actually for just to go a little into the whole hype for 5, I was actually really excited for 5 because by the time it was announced in magazines, I was already a really big player of 4. I loved how everything came out so much of it, and at this point, I was hooked. So I was following Resident Evil 5 since its first announcement, and I remember Resident Evil 5 was first announced in a magazine in 2005, and
Yeah.
the game didn't come out until 2009, right?
Something like that.
And for 4 years, I'm trying to follow every little bits and pieces of information I can call. And I clearly remember them reading an article saying how they were going to implement heat strokes, pretty much. If you're out in the sun for too long,
Your aim was gonna get bad. It's gonna be hard to see.
Your eyes would need to adjust if you went into a dark area immediately after exiting sunlight. And I remember reading that. I was like, oh, okay, that sounds pretty terrifying.
Yeah, it sounded like they had great ideas for the game, but the final product turned into, to borrow a paraphrase from Yahtzee, Resident Evil 4 abridged version. It felt like a shorter, watered-down version of Resident Evil 4 with co-op thrown in. And
you had a terrible inventory.
At least that was a throwback to the classics. But my point is,
where you have to wear your armor in a pocket of your armor,
and at the same time, it crapped on pretty much half of the fan base's motivations for being a fan in the first place. It also tried to tie itself in with the older games, presumably to address the complaints with 4's story. So it basically, without necessarily bringing Umbrella back, its story tied itself into Umbrella through Tricell and the progenitor virus, which now originates from some underground flower in Africa for some reason. Somehow I don't get the feeling that was entirely what they had planned in 0 and 3.5, but I'll take what I can get.
And Wesker's back. Yeah.
And Wesker is back. Yes, this is our big showdown with Wesker, although he doesn't really enter the fray until the last third of the game, which is
where
somewhat
he's become
annoying.
Neo from the Matrix.
Because let me put it this way. In Code Veronica, we had Alfred Ashford hounding our ass the entire time. That wasn't meant to be a gay joke. It just sort of came out as one now that I think about it. In Resident Evil 4, we knew Sadler was in the background. We had his cronies the entire way, sort of giving us grief. We were always sort of dealing with a headliner villain. And in Resident Evil 5, we have an annoying cackling dude who appears for... How long did he appear for?
He died the first third of the game.
He dies
Well, he is basically the first major boss of the first third of the game, which... But the thing is, how often did he appear and talk to us?
Like twice.
Yeah, whereas... let me think. Oh, wait, no. The first third of 4 had Hunnigan.
Isn't Hunnigan like the... Oh, wait. I thought Hunnigan was a good guy.
Hunnigan was your radio contact for the first third of the game, but for the second, third thirds of the game, your radio banter was actually with the villains who had hijacked your walkie-talkie comm or whatever. The thing about that was you spent the entire game with a clear adversary in mind, and they were constantly, at least from a distance, they were fucking with you the whole time, and it sort of gave the story a sense of objective. I don't know how to say it.
Having your villains play a role in the story is very, very important.
It's kind of like the difference between Shinra and Sephiroth. Sephiroth's just sort of he shows up in a couple pretty cool scenes, and he's the final boss, but you don't really see him all that much. On the other hand, the Turks, Shinra as a company, now that's where it's at.
Yeah.
Alright.
Yeah, I can see what you mean.
Yeah, and in Resident Evil 4, once Wesker starts to become part of the story, he plays his role well, apart from one or two really cringeworthy lines.
Wait, Wesker's entire dialogue is nothing but cringeworthy dialogue, and I love every second of it.
Total global
Most of
saturation.
the time, I can take him somewhat seriously because he's badass enough to pull it off, but
Matrix.
there are one or two lines that are just beyond his scope of badassery and then just outright ridiculous. And then there's the final boss. The final boss is like, he injects himself with Ouroboros, which is fine, but okay, what Ouroboros actually does to him is just stupid. He's like, he grows all these black tentacles and basically turns into the scrap monster from Oil Desert Zone. And it's like, what? I'm sorry? This is our final clash? It's not exactly
Fight him
what
in an active volcano where Chris should burn up the second he's near the lava.
Volcano just added to the ridiculousness.
And then boulder punching action.
Look, I will say, I will give Resident Evil 5 credit for production values. I think it's a fantastic looking game, and it has a really great soundtrack too. I love the orchestral pieces that play when you're fighting bosses and stuff like that.
It's just not one of Capcom's better attempts at story.
I agree, and to me, even though, look, I know it's a video game, but that volcano sequence at the end, because one thing they established early in the game is that Ouroboros hates fire. So the last boss is inside a fucking volcano. Shouldn't the Ouroboros immediately die upon leaving the canister? I mean, why does bonding it with Wesker suddenly give it immunity towards fire? I don't think they really did a good job explaining that. And why am I socking a boulder?
Not just immunity towards fire. Okay, he is like nipple deep in lava at the end, and he's still alive and kicking. At that point, his Ouroboros side should have just kicked the bucket and dragged him under. But you know, they were trying some decent stuff with it, and even 5's plot has its moments. Like, I really liked...
I like the lab in it.
I liked the sort of... Excella, alright? Even though she was an utterly cheesy character, I really liked how she had it so bad for Wesker, and then Wesker just turns around and sticks a syringe in her neck and turns her into a boss monster for no good reason. It's just like, it's like he got fed up and decided to kick her out of the game in the most fantastic way possible.
Wait. Wesker had a fangirl and he got rid of her?
Yes.
She's basically the incredibly busty, cleavage-obsessed,
Why would you ever do that?
Tricell.
Ted,
If I had a
you,
busted
Ted-
fangirl doing anything I want to do, I would not jab a needle into her neck.
Ted, think, know of it this way. You've seen Matrix Reloaded, right?
No, I watched the good Matrix movie and that was it.
Okay, I was gonna say she's like the Meryl Vincian's wife.
Well, I have no idea what that means.
Excella is a cliche, and she's there entirely because Wesker's working with a company called Tricell, and she runs it, I guess. But she appears in a few scenes with Wesker, and she has an accent, and that's really the only things I remember about her because she's so forgettable. But then Wesker turns around, stabs her in the back with an Ouroboros needle, and she
Forces her
basically
to be a boss.
she basically acts all betrayed and then turns into a giant fucking monster. And it was the highlight of the game.
No, my favorite part of the game was the lab, where it pretends to be Resident Evil 2 for a little bit.
Well, I mean, from a story perspective, the highlight of the game from a gameplay perspective and from a plot connection perspective was the Umbrella Laboratory and the liquors. But
It pretended to be Resident Evil 2 for about an hour.
My favorite part of Resident Evil 5's plot was Excella getting betrayed and turning into a boss monster. Because on one hand, it just seems like such a Wesker thing to do, and on the other hand,
It's so stupid.
Fall to that kind of fate. She was a bitch.
Yeah, she was.
So, anything else?
Am I cutting out?
A little bit.
Just a little bit,
you
but
guys
it's
are.
not too noticeable. But just to talk about Resident Evil 5 as a whole, Just
It's
before
not
we
a
move
terrible
on. It's
game.
not a bad game, because
Are you online right now?
yes, we are.
That explains it.
Oh, someone's eating up his bandwidth. Continue.
Oh, I see.
Resident
Okay.
Evil 5 isn't a bad game by any means. It's just not as good as 4.
Yeah, I was really hyped for 5. I went to the midnight release, and when I got home, I played it for like 8 hours straight. And I really had an enjoyable time. Gameplay wise, it's pretty much the same as 4. Minus the inventory system. I think it's my biggest gripe with it is the inventory system. It's just because
Fucking hell. I'm sorry. My brother chose an odd moment to go online with White Knight Chronicles, and it totally fucked up my internet.
That's bizarre.
Well,
we
we're
were
both
just, we were
running
just giving final thoughts on 5.
Yeah, I still think 5 is a good game.
It's a good game.
I won't play it. I won't play it as much as 4, but because we're actually getting ready to do 5 soon, relatively soon, because I'm going to start recording the footage for that soon.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to it because I still have a good time with 5.
There's enough there to have fun with, but if you're playing the best, it's still 4.
Yeah, I still think 4 is the better game.
And I haven't played 6, and it's only been out very briefly. So.
Yes.
But I still was accurate. In my
I would love
comparison.
to talk about 6, but my Skype seems to be really jittery right now. Oh, thank you for connecting to the internet again, right after it was fucking up my internet.
Johnny, go. What do you think?
Maybe it's a sign that. Oh no, because I can't really say much about 6 because I
You
too
know what?
have not
Save your
played the game.
game. Go back to the menu and disconnect from the internet, Steve. Okay? It's not that hard.
No, Mom, I don't want any bagel bites.
Where are the Cheetos?
If there are girls there, I want to do them.
Basically, the only thing I have to say about 6 is that I accurately compared it to Sonic 06. Leon coasts at a reasonable pace while bringing around a useless female character who really doesn't add much to the plot.
Shadow?
Let's see. Chris' Shadow the Hedgehog has a lot of useless weapons and gameplay styles that really don't fit the series at all, and Mr. McFanfic has a lot of powers that no one asked for in the series and sticks out like a sore thumb compared to everyone else.
Pure coincidence.
It's creepy, but I'm pretty sure it's just a coincidence.
Okay, I missed like 5 straight minutes of conversation because I couldn't hear anything but jitters.
We're just getting at is that I own 6. I got it the day after it was released, and I've only played about like 4 to 5 hours in the Leon scenario, and I'm loving what I'm playing. It's just that I really can't say anything until I get the full experience. I think Leon scenario alone is better than 5 in so many regards, but
yes,
I don't want to say anything until I complete the game as a whole.
Well, it's a good thing my Skype is cleared up because I've played almost the entire game. And by almost the entire game, I mean all 3 main scenarios and the first 2 chapters of Ada's story, which I sort of drifted away from because it was slightly frustrating to play, to be entirely honest.
Just give a general thoughts.
Give a general thought. Cause
yes,
I think
we'll go into detail with Resident Evil 6 when all of us have had time with it. But general thoughts. Okay, Leon's story. Just about where I expect Resident Evil to be at this point in time, where it should have evolved in the first place, except for the inventory system, which is somehow even worse than 5.
Wait, how do you make it worse than 5, where your armor takes a spot in your armor?
Okay. They fixed the space issues with armor and shit by eliminating armor items entirely and giving your weapons a separate inventory of their own so you can carry all your weapons and it doesn't take up any of your 9 spaces. The problem with the inventory system is that the control is so convoluted. It brings up this sort of holographic overlay which is slightly out of place considering the series, and you sort of cycle through your 9 spaces.
Wait, they messed up a menu screen. You messed up control on a menu screen.
And it's like, it gets used to, but it gets used to, but we had a 9-space grid before, which actually makes it faster in real time to get to the item you want because you
just
can
press
go
in one direction.
any direction you want. Whereas you can only go left and right. in the not in and it's and the only things that take up space in your inventory in this game are herbs, weapons, ammunition, grenades, and first aid sprays. Um, the ammunition still sort of limited to a certain amount of bullets per space, so it can get pretty cramped in there. Um, but the one good thing that I do like about the inventory system is that when you mix herbs, you turn them into capsule packs of 1 to 6 herbs per pop, and then you just dump them into your auto heal button, which takes them out of your inventory slots entirely. And you can pile as many auto heal pops as you want into your auto heal button, which is quick heal, I should say, quick heal. And when you tap the quick heal button, your character will pop a capsule and heal 1 space of health. And you can rapid fire it as many times as you want to heal up to 6 spaces in 1 pop.
And while I completely understand why you would like something like that. Me personally, my biggest gripe with it is that why do I have to put it in the tablet to use it? Why can't I select the herb from the inventory menu? Something I've been able to do since 1, and just
use
hit
it.
use.
Have you ever tried
Yes.
eating a leaf? Stuff's
Well,
gross,
They've
man.
been doing it since Resident Evil 1. Shit, why stop now?
All right, okay. The herbs in I always imagined up until they started having them pop herbal pills to heal everything. I always imagined the herbs as something that you put onto a bandage, and it's sort of like
Just rub it on the wound.
yes, that kind of thing. But the advantage to this is that you say you mix a green and red herb to make a full heal herb in the classics. Okay, you use it, it's gone, even if you only used it to heal a minor wound. In 6, mixing a red with a green makes a capsule pack of 6 capsules that you can use all at once or in little bits and pieces, however you you need to at the time. So, but in that sense, it's a lot more flexible.
Flexible, yes, but it's still. I don't think it would kill them if I could just choose to heal myself with an herb from the inventory menu. Because there are times, let's say, like.
That is an option I missed when I had to fiddle with my herbs in the middle of a combat situation. Which is
exactly what I was going to get into, because the inventory system is real time again, like it was in 5. So if there are no herbal pills inside your capsule, you have to finick around with your inventory system and get your thing loaded before you can use it. And if you're in the middle of combat and you're at low health, that's almost impossible to do.
yeah.
And I don't know. It just seems so glaring that they would not do something like that.
To me, it's a system that would have worked better if they had made it a non-real-time inventory system like 4 had. Like that would have been a great way to evolve the herb mixing system. But they didn't. But they went with multiplayer again, and it's the inventory is the one thing that will still annoy you no matter whether you're playing multiplayer or single player. I would have appreciated the option to have single player games pause the game for you while you're fiddling with your inventory bullshit, but they don't. I'm not sure why they don't, because it's perfectly doable. And in fact, okay, when you're playing single player, you can push select to pause the game. You can also open a settings menu that still operates in real time with your character.
Wait, a settings menu is real time?
Yes.
Damn it!
Your character crouches.
How did you mess this shit up?
It's supposed to be usable. It's supposed to be usable in.
It's very angry.
Mode. Okay,
you can't mess up menus. That's like the one thing you can't mess up in this game.
It's supposed to be usable in multiplayer. The thing is that they didn't adjust it for single player. They just shoehorned in a basic pause function for when you needed to get up and take a shit, and that is all. All right. The thing about it is, okay, it's the one issue that still bugs me from 5's multiplayer is the inventory. Everything else about the single player is fine. There are points where the level design is very blatantly co-op based. Like your characters will get separated, and then they'll have to pull levers to open the way for the other person. Very basic shit. Or they'll have to cover for each other. But your character's AI is generally smart enough about what it needs to do that it doesn't fuck it up. So it's entirely on you not to die while they're doing it. Which reminds me of the most annoying part. This is oddly specific, but there are blade traps in chapter, was it 2 or 3? There are blade traps in the underground crypt, like swinging blades that you need to slide and crawl under, otherwise you get insta-killed by them. One of them...
Wait, Indiana Jones bullshit? Really?
Yes, it's slightly ridiculous considering it's in Leon's story, and all of the zombies are like dead corpses that were like medieval people who died. So it's like you walked into Oblivion, or no, you walked into a level of Skyrim. You walked into a Skyrim dungeon. That's what it reminds me of.
I would think Army of Darkness is more appropriate.
Well, it does look like Army of Darkness, yeah, but I think Skyrim, because that's literally like the first few dungeons in Skyrim, is exactly this. Blade traps and shit with armored zombies running at you. One of them, you have to get a crank to open a gate. Very classic, right? You have to get the crank, except the crank is in the hands of an enemy for some godforsaken reason, and that enemy, when I'm playing at least, always seems to die underneath the blade trap. So I need to run at the blade trap, slide under it, and then, because the game doesn't let you crawl on your belly, you have to lay on your back and shuffle around like an idiot. I had to shuffle over to the item, pick it up, and then shuffle back out. Or, once I figured out the controls for it, turn my side toward where I needed to go, and then roll out from underneath the blade trap, because crawling is just too simple.
Meanwhile, Helena's staring at Leon, wondering, is the rolling really necessary, dude? I like to be dramatic, I'm sorry.
Yes.
You, Peppy.
The game has some really off-the-wall moments because of its design flaws, but for the most part, it's a really well-designed game, and it has a lot more variety in its gameplay than 5 did. Partly because of the 3 scenarios, but partly because within each scenario there's more, there are more unique situations, like the big boss snake battle. All right? It's a giant fucking snake, all right? You might think Resident Evil 1 vibes, except that is completely overpowered by the fact that it attacks from stealth, has stealth camouflage powers, and escapes at one point through an air duct of all things.
Wait,
At which point, I have to think, Capcom, this is too blatant to be an accident. You're fucking with us now, aren't you?
I was actually going to say that in terms of like overall story structure, the overall structure of the game itself, I got a lot of Metal Gear Solid vibes, because first thing, there's a lot of set pieces in this game. There are times where quick time events are, if you love them in 4 and you love them in 5, you're going to love them here, because this game is plastered with them. And for the most part, I don't think they're so annoying. It's just that there's a lot of them.
The quick time events in this game, okay, I don't think I ever failed a single one. And that is a surprise to me, because I died a lot to those in 4 and 5. It's like, they're easy, there's just a lot of them.
I don't get the point of quick time events, because, weren't they a new thing around the time that RE4 came out?
God of War popularized them, but they were fairly new around that time. Yes.
Okay, so I forgive that, but around the time 5 came out, I'm pretty sure the "we don't like quick time events" thing had started, and by the time that why? Why quick time events?
Game designers want to have cool, flashy cutscenes that they can put in trailers, but they don't want people complaining about how non-interactive they are. So they bullshitted their way into making them gameplay.
If I want to play DDR, I'm going to play DDR. I don't want to play DDR with a controller while watching a cutscene. Okay, I'm just saying.
It's Dance Dance Revolution with a knife. Yeah. Alright, back to 6 though. Regarding the 3 main scenarios that I've played and beaten, Leon's is Resident Evil down to a T. You don't even fight a single Yavo, or Ganado as they're more commonly known. You don't fight a single one of those except for Ustanok in the point where Jake and Sherry just very conveniently intersect with your story and you have a boss battle with them. Something I want to touch on later is when I get to the multiplayer, is that boss battle. But the thing about the other 2 scenarios is that they both focus on the Yavos and you don't fight a single zombie. So it's like 1/3 Resident Evil 1 through 3 with good controls and camera, and 2/3 Resident Evil 4 with freakier Ganados.
Yeah.
Jake's story is probably the most unique of the three, in that it has more action centric focus than Leon's, but every chapter has a lot of gimmick to it, except maybe for the first one. There are stealth sections where you're trying to avoid the Nemesis clone, or his Searchlight Firefly things for some reason. That was kind of out of place, to be honest. Yes, I know, Steve. There's a jailbreak sequence where, well, I was playing as Sherry the whole time because I don't like Jake. So there's a jailbreak sequence where I'm running around in an unnecessarily revealing hospital gown, wielding nothing but a stun baton. So it's pretty much Alice from the Resident Evil movies, except not quite as shitty. And with Wolverine healing powers for some reason, although that doesn't really factor into the gameplay at all. It would have been nice if it did. Would have saved my life a couple times. And you know, there's this one part where you're sort of driving a raft platform down a debris covered river, and occasionally having to ward off zombies as you make your way down. I think that was the point where the hideously mutated chainsaw monster came at me. And, you know, Jake's story is very gimmick-based, whereas Chris's story is it's as action-centric as Resident Evil 5, but I think they pulled it off better.
So, all in all, it's a good game?
It's a good game.
I've heard very mixed things about it, though. Like, a lot of people say it's awful. A lot of people say it's amazing. A lot of people just kind of say, eh. So I think it's very decisive from what I've seen.
Well, that sort of comes with the quote-unquote Sonic Adventure formula to begin with. They have 3 stories with 3 very distinct gameplay focuses, and they're trying to cater to multiple people at the same time, but the end result is that the people need to have it all their own way, don't like 2 of the 3 scenarios, so they rate the entire game poorly based on what they don't like about those.
Well, how long is each scenario compared to, say, Resident Evil 4?
Or, in the reverse, they really like Leon's scenario. Rate the
No,
game
well,
game.
I mean, like, lengthwise. How long is each scenario compared to the length of a full-on Resident Evil game? Are they all like a third? Is each story like a third of the length of RE4 and all of them added together make the same length as a total, or what?
Each of the games is 5 chapters long, and each of the chapters took quite a while to get through. I don't think any of them by themselves is as long as Resident Evil 4, but I do think they are at least as long as Resident Evil 5 was. But then I played at a somewhat relaxed pace, so I might be overestimating their length somewhat.
Do you recall like total clear time for Leon's scenario? Did I give you a rank at the end of anything?
They didn't give me a rank. There's a record screen that keeps track of that shit, but I never looked at it.
Because let's say if Leon's scenario, let's say if Leon's scenario took as long as like 10 or 12 hours, that's about the length of a first playthrough of 4.
Because I'm thinking about it from one of the big problems with with Sonic Adventure is that you had to play through Sonic's story up to a certain point to unlock Knuckles, Tails, Big, Amy, Gamma. Resident Evil 6, you have all 3 at the start, right?
Yeah, you
So
have all
if you-
3.
if
The only unlockable is Ada, and that's when you beat all 3 of the others.
So, I mean, if Leon's scenario is about as long as a Resident Evil game generally, and you just play that and you like that, you know what? You've got an entire game's worth of stuff that you like there, so really you can ignore everything else and then you'll be fine, you know?
Yeah,
I mean, if you
pretty
want to
much.
complete it and you don't really like those other 2, I can understand it from that section. But, you know, there is a good chunk of the game that you really enjoyed there, so I wouldn't say that it's terrible just because the other stuff isn't your style.
I know, but to me in that case though, you can't help but get the thought off the back of your mind is, I'm not getting the full experience.
I can understand that, especially like Trauma Team does a sort of stuff like this where you do different sort of operation styles, and when you're playing the one you don't want, you just think, oh, I'm just need to get through this so that I can play more of the style that I like. There's always that thought, and that's kind of why I don't really like the Sonic. There's got to be a better term for it than the
You don't
Sonic
like the Sonic
Adventure.
Adventure 2 method, don't you?
Well, no, I like.
No,
well, like,
not so much the one method where it lets you play the entire Sonic story and then you can play or ignore the others at your leisure, and it doesn't.
Well,
get
oh no, well,
Sonic
in Trauma Team, you play through each story all at the same time. It's just that you need to beat all of them to unlock more missions with everyone at the end in an epilogue sequence.
Yeah, there's nothing like that in this. The or are you talking about a last story?
Yeah, it's a last story.
Well, I wouldn't call Ada Wong's story a last story. It's more like what's going on behind the scenes with Ada, and it basically it's there to clear up all the suspense and question marks that Ada Wong's involvement in the other three stories raises, because she is just as fucking mysterious as ever. Only now there's an evil doppelganger of her running around, and your only indication of this comes in Chris's story, where you see two different Ada Wongs in two different outfits running around the same ship, although never at the same time, so Chris, being the dumbass that he is, thinks he's chasing only one.
I've got to put on my completely different designer ballroom dress now.
Yeah, pretty much. The thing about Ada's story, and I've only played 2 chapters, is that it is even more gimmicky than Jake's story, but at the same time, a lot harder to play. Like the first chapter starts out as a stealth infiltration mission in a goddamn submarine of all things, which totally sounds like a Resident Evil game, right? It's like Metal Gear Solid with shitty controls, but soon enough it turns into this submarine is sinking and it's like overturned and shit, and we need to get out before it gets to a certain depth. So cue the frustrating escape mission where the environment and the enemies together conspire against you to make sure that you can't possibly make it through on your first try without dying. And the enemies in that area are the fucking bug monsters that are like swarms of bees that for some reason make their giant queen bee entirely transparent until you shoot aimlessly through the flock a bunch of times and reveal it. One of the most annoying enemies in Resident Evil history, because, well, apart from the fact that it makes no sense, it's like if it gets you, it's sort of it acts like a swarm of bees it would in real life, and it fucking swarms you. And if it gets on you, it's on you like white on rice, and it just won't get off. And you're in these enclosed spaces with these as Ada, so it's like your only recourse is to duck into a swimming section where they can't follow you.
That sounds so Looney Tunes. And I had no idea why. Would you consider them worse than Reapers in 5?
What were the Reapers in 5 again?
First were the insects that instant killed you the moment they grabbed you.
Oh, wait, those were like one of the head mutations or something.
Yeah, no. In Resident Evil 5, the insect creatures that came out of the cocoons, the one with like the 4 arms, they kind of look like chimeras from 1. If they got anywhere close to you, they grabbed you, it was an instant kill. You know, it would.
Well, I never had much trouble with those, but that's because I was.
Okay, then I'm going to assume they're not as bad. They're worse.
Well, you know, the bug monsters appeared in at least one of the other stories, and they didn't give me as much trouble there. It's just their placement in Ada's story that makes them such a pain in the ass. The second story of Ada Wong, also the only time outside of Leon's story where you'll actually fight a zombie, takes place in the American area, and basically it connects to a point where Leon and Ada meet up. So a lot of that is just playing through Leon's area in a different direction. And it's actually not that bad, but I seem to recall having some issues with the traps and puzzles in the area. It wasn't terribad, but it didn't feel as well designed as the rest of the game, if that makes any sense. And the fact that the only zombies you fight outside of Leon's story are the fucking Skyrim zombies kind of rubs me the wrong way.
Well, because we have to start wrapping it up because we have to get back to commentary. None of the audience need to know
Yeah.
about this shit. Can we, if you guys can give like a general consensus on the franchise as a whole in like one or
It
two
looks like a
paragraphs?
fucking disaster from
Well,
an outside perspective.
Well, from your perspective, in terms of story, yes. I mean, because
God, yes.
like I mentioned earlier, the game, while relatively structured well, you can see where they're going with this. They are very prone to ass pulls, or
Yes.
and you can clearly see that they have no idea where they're going with certain plot elements, so they have to pull something out of their ass to justify it. And most of the time, it backfires or it just raises too many questions.
Can we backpedal real quick? Because I realized I completely forgot to talk about Six's story, and it's actually kind of important because I have one major complaint and a few compliments for it. The major complaint is that the files are all emblem shooting things like the blue medals in 4. So to get all your shit explained, 5 had a similar problem. To get all the blanks filled in, you have to find these incredibly obscurely placed blue emblem things and shoot them, or if you're close enough, lucky enough to not have to waste ammo, you can kick them or knife them, as the case may be. And the files are interesting, if way too goddamn short. The thing about it is, the story picks up. All of the stories pick up in the middle of the action. Like Leon's story. You start Leon's story up, he's pointing his gun at the president, you have no fucking idea how he got there. And I don't think that
medias
actually-
res.
Yes, in medias res, and it can be pulled off very poorly, Final Fantasy 13, or very well. And this game isn't anywhere near the very well category. The
Better or worse than Final Fantasy 13?
Well, let's
No,
see.
that's a completely different discussion. I don't think we should answer that. Right now.
I think they actually break even because you have to rely on files and shit to fill in the blanks, which is the same exact the same exact flaw, only in a different form. The plot, the story itself is actually pretty good, except for one or two points where the character intersection sections seem forced or way too convenient, like the point where Leon and Helena are in an airplane crash that just happens to land like 2 feet away from Jake and Sherry so that they can have a tag team boss fight.
Plot magnets.
And the story, once you have the full picture, which none of the 3 campaigns will actually give you, once you have the full picture, the story is pretty good. But I think it works a little too hard to make you want to play the other 3 stories to get the full picture. For example, the Ada connection that I already worked with, or they mention things like Leon sends Chris off to rescue Jake, and supposedly that's how they save the world, by rescuing Jake. And it's like, at the end of Leon's story, it's like, Hunnigan is like, "Oh right, we have a way to combat the virus now," and you're like, "Huh? Wait, oh yeah, I remember that. God damn it, I'm gonna have to play one of their stories to find out how that happens now." And then at the end of Chris or Jake's story specifically, they both get separated, fighting their own specific final bosses, as like, "Oh dear God, I hope the other person gets out," or when you're playing as Chris, "I hope that motherfucker dies." My main problems with the story, though, are Jake Mueller, aka Wesker Jr. and/or Mr. McFanfic, and simultaneously the most badass and ridiculous thing in the game, random partner dudes. Badass, ridiculous transformation at the end of the game, which I know I raved about in a very positive way on Facebook. At the same time, it's like the most off-the-wall thing in the game, because he turns into the prototype with infamous powers, and that is what he is for the final boss, which in single player for me was just a support role, but I want to play as Pierce now just to see I want to play as Pierce now to see what it feels like to be that.
Is it
But-
unlockable mercenaries?
Unlimited powers.
You think it's a unlockable mercenaries character?
I don't know, but if it is, I will. I'm totally all over that. The thing about it is, it's another Alexia Ashford in that it just completely exceeds what you expect bioweapons to do, and that's on top of the bug monsters, the extremely quick mutations of all these C-virus Ganados, and the and all the other shit that happens throughout the story, which is all pretty extreme, but relatively within the boundaries of this is a biohazard we are talking about, not Final Fantasy transformation magic. The lightning, I don't mind the form Pierce takes, even if it does resemble the prototype a bit much. The lightning powers were just a little out of nowhere. It's like, how does a virus give you lightning powers?
Well, considering everything that we've
Midi-chlorians.
already, I was going to say,
Midi-chlorians.
considering everything, or nanomachines, considering everything that we've already been exposed with in terms of 4, like Napoleon turning into that whatever the fuck thing mutation that is, with two
That
tentacles
could
in it.
still, even that could still fall within the boundaries of biohazard. Really pushing the envelope, but it's still in there.
Is it worse than Fireblood?
I could finagle a logical explanation by saying that we use electricity in our nervous systems anyway, so it's just really amplified. But yeah, it's slightly worse than Fireblood.
I think we've gone long enough on this, though.
Right. The long story short, I want to rant for a half a minute about Jake Mueller. Okay, he is way too obviously trying to be badass, and it just, because of his origins, because we know about his origins to begin with, he comes off as a really bad fanfic character for the first half of his story. He sort of matures after chapter 3. He starts to mature, and even though he still comes off as contrived. After that point, you can sort of get behind him as a character. He's a little mellow. He mellows out, and I'm good with him at that point. It's just like I can't. It's like they want to bring Wesker back without bringing Wesker back, and they fail miserably. And they went with the most. They went with the most cliche concept they could have possibly pulled up. And I'm
My
just
long
like,
lost brother.
no.
Risk.
Senos.
Long lost son.
He was invented in Umbrella's underground outer space lab.
In space!
Okay, only the third most cliche concept. All right. At some unspecified point, and now that I think about it, he's kind of like Nero in this regard. At some unspecified point, Sparta / Wesker had a son, and suddenly he's the main character of our sequel, despite his origin never being fully explained.
You know what though? I'm curious enough now because I know you have so much to say about this game. Because you said you were going to go on a half-minute tangent, and it's been already 3 minutes.
Oh,
And,
sorry.
no, I know, but you have a lot to say about the game, and I really want to.
John hasn't finished playing it. I haven't played it at
Just
all.
say,
No
I'm never-
interest.
There's the thing. There's the thing. I want to get to recording this game soon because I want to make sure you guys. I want to make sure you have all this shit still fresh in your head by the time we're getting to the commentary of it. Because I really think you're bringing up a lot of interesting points. Thing is, though, for a retrospective, as we're doing now, we don't want to spend too long because now this retrospective, you do realize now, is one half Resident Evil's 1 through 5, and the other half is Resident Evil 6.
Yes.
But I think we should just save the rest of our thoughts for the Resident Evil 6 playthrough, which I actually now want to get to very soon.
Would you be doing 6 before 5?
No. We'll do 5 first, but 5 won't be very long because I actually really know that game pretty well.
Resident Evil 5 is actually quite a bit shorter than 4. Are we going to be doing the DLC chapters?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll do Lost in Thursday. We'll also do...
If I want to be your co-op partner for that, I'm going to have to get those.
Okay.
And so That's the plan for Resident Evil then.
Okay.
What's going on?
Alright,
Well-
thanks for listening in on this, whatever it was.
Wow, Ted, that was almost as nostalgic as Leon crashing a cop car half an hour into his story.
You're going to enjoy 4, Ted. Trust us.
I got it for $10. I better enjoy it.
Yay.
Right,
Oh yeah, you're not dead.
Right, so...
I might as well be.
Alright, so that was our Resident Evil thing. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see when we decide to do another retrospective about a year from now.
Laters.
Bye.